We should know the history and qualities of our favorite foods, their benefits and drawbacks, so that we can enjoy them comfortably and according to the rules. The history of potatoes. Please let us know in the comments where you are watching this history video and what time you are watching it. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more history videos in the future. Deep in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Andes Mountains, where thin air meets rugged earth and ancient glaciers carve the landscape, the story of the potato first unfolded more than 10,000 years ago. Long before any written records captured human triumphs or struggles, wild potato plants grew scattered across the high plateaus and valleys surrounding the vast waters of Lake Titicaca, that shimmering inland sea perched nearly 12,000 feet above sea level. These early wild relatives belonged to the nightshade family, sharing distant genetic ties with tomatoes and other nightshade cousins, and their tubers formed as swollen underground stems rather than true roots, storing energy in the form of starch while small eyes on their surfaces protected budding shoots for future growth. Hunter-gatherer communities roaming these altitudes noticed the small, bitter tubers pushing through the soil in clusters, sometimes no larger than a thumb, in shades ranging from pale cream to deep purple, and they began the slow, patient process of discovery that would transform this humble plant into one of humanity's most enduring companions. The very first people to taste the potato did so cautiously, for the wild versions carried natural defenses in the form of glycoalkaloids such as solanine and chaconine, bitter compounds concentrated especially in the skins, sprouts, and green-tinged flesh that could cause stomach upset, headaches, or worse if eaten in quantity. Yet these same ancient foragers learned through trial and careful observation that boiling, steaming, or baking the tubers softened their texture, reduced some of the bitterness, and unlocked a surprising source of sustenance packed with complex carbohydrates that provided steady energy in the cold, oxygen-thin environment where other crops struggled. Archaeological traces from grinding stones unearthed at sites like Jisquerumoco in the western Titicaca Basin reveal microscopic starch grains, confirming that by around 3,400 to 2,200 years before the Common Era, these early communities were already processing and consuming potatoes on a regular basis, grinding them into pastes or mashing them after cooking to create simple but nourishing meals that sustained families through harsh mountain winters. Over countless generations, selective breeding turned these wild plants into something far more reliable and palatable. Farmers chose tubers that were larger, less bitter, and more resistant to frost, gradually reducing the toxic glycoalkaloid levels while increasing starch content that could reach 20 to 22% in some varieties. The potato plant itself grew as a hardy herbaceous perennial, reaching up to 3 feet tall with hairy stems, pinnate leaves divided into 4 or more pairs of leaflets, and delicate flowers in shades of white, pink, purple, or blue clustered at the top. Each bloom pollinated by insects and later producing small green fruits resembling tiny tomatoes filled with hundreds of minuscule seeds. But it was the underground tubers that captured the imagination, forming at the ends of long stolons in response to shortening daylight hours, each one equipped with lenticels for breathing and the remarkable ability to sprout new plants from those protective eyes even after months in storage. By 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, in the region spanning what is now southern Peru and northwestern Bolivia, the potato had become the first domesticated root vegetable anywhere on Earth, with cultivation spreading steadily through the Andean Cordillera as communities exchanged knowledge and seeds. One of the most ingenious innovations born from this relationship was the creation of chuño, a freeze-dried potato preparation that allowed storage for years or even decades without spoilage. During the frigid Andean nights, farmers would spread harvested tubers on the ground to freeze solid, then let the morning sun thaw them gently before squeezing out the water by trampling with bare feet or using simple presses. This cycle of freezing, thawing, and dehydrating was repeated over several days until the potatoes shrank into lightweight, rock-hard nuggets that retained their nutrients while becoming impervious to rot, insects, or mold. Chuño could then be ground into flour, rehydrated into stews, or carried as portable rations by travelers and armies alike, providing a lifeline during famines or long journeys across the high passes. The process concentrated the potato's natural vitamins and minerals, turning it into a superfood perfectly adapted to the altitude where fresh produce was scarce. Early Andean people also developed papas secas by boiling, peeling, chopping, and fermenting tubers to make tacash, a mildly sour product valued for its digestive benefits, or extracting almidón de papa, a pure starch used for thickening soups and even in rudimentary medicinal poultices. The nutritional profile that made the potato such a revelation to these ancient societies is nothing short of remarkable. A single medium tuber, when boiled with its skin intact, delivers about 87 calories, mostly from complex starches that break down slowly for sustained energy, along with nearly 2 grams of dietary fiber concentrated in that skin to support healthy digestion and steady blood sugar levels when prepared thoughtfully. It offers a moderate but meaningful supply of vitamin C, up to 13 milligrams or 14% of daily needs in a 100-gram serving, which helped bolster immunity and prevent scurvy-like symptoms in the vitamin-poor highland diet. Potassium levels reached nearly 400 milligrams per serving, aiding fluid balance and heart rhythm in a place where physical exertion was constant and dehydration a constant threat. Vitamin B6 supports brain function and metabolism at 9 to 18% of daily value, while folate in the peel and colored flesh contributes to cell repair, and smaller amounts of magnesium, phosphorus, iron, and manganese round out a mineral profile that made potatoes far more than mere filler. The protein, though modest at nearly 2 grams per serving, is of surprisingly high quality for a plant food, containing all essential amino acids in balanced proportions thanks to the unique patented storage protein. Colored varieties, with their red, blue, or yellow flesh rich in polyphenols, chlorogenic acid, catechins, and carotenoids like lutein, added antioxidant power that protected cells from the oxidative stress of intense ultraviolet radiation at those elevations. Yet the potato was not without its drawbacks, even in those early days of discovery. The very glycoalkaloids that protected wild plants from pests could accumulate to dangerous levels if tubers were exposed to light and turned green, or if sprouts formed, leading communities to develop strict rules for storage in dark, cool pits and careful inspection before eating. Bitter or malformed tubers were discarded or fed to animals after processing, teaching lessons about toxicity that still guide safe preparation today. Raw potatoes offered little digestibility because their starch resists human enzymes until cooked, and over-reliance on any single food carried risks of nutrient gaps if not balanced with other mountain crops like quinoa or legumes. In times of poor harvest, dependence on stored chuño could lead to monotonous diets, and improper fermentation occasionally introduced mild toxins or digestive discomfort. Still, the advantages far outweighed these challenges, allowing populations to thrive where maize and other grains failed to mature reliably above 10,000 feet. As agriculture took hold, the potato wove itself into the very fabric of Andean culture and spirituality. Potters shaped clay vessels in its likeness, sometimes realistic, sometimes anthropomorphic with human faces or limbs emerging from the tuber form, reflecting the deep respect these societies held for the plant that sustained them through drought, frost, and famine. In the formative periods from 1500 to 500 years before the Common Era and into the Tiwanaku era, boiled and steamed potatoes replaced thinner soups as the daily staple, their hearty texture providing the bulk needed for labor-intensive lives herding llamas and alpacas or tending terraced fields. Isotopic analysis of ancient skeletons confirms that tubers formed the backbone of the diet alongside quinoa and animal proteins, fueling the rise of complex societies. By the time the Inca Empire expanded across the continent, the potato had become the principal energy source for millions, stored in vast granaries as chuño to feed armies on the march and entire cities during lean seasons. Inca mythology honored Aximama, the goddess of potatoes, who was believed to watch over fertile soils and bountiful harvests, with rituals involving offerings of the best tubers to ensure continued abundance. Farmers maintained hundreds of distinct landraces within single valleys, some flowery and ideal for mashing into thick porridges, others waxy and perfect for boiling whole, with shapes from round to elongated fingerlings and skins in every hue from snowy white to jet black, each variety finely tuned to microclimates differing by just a few hundred feet of elevation. The diversity was astonishing, with over 5,000 native types developed through careful observation and cross-breeding, many still grown today in those same Andean communities using techniques passed down for millennia. Some varieties matured in as little as 60 days to beat the short growing season, while others stored exceptionally well thanks to thicker skins or natural pest resistance. The tubers themselves varied in starch composition, with higher amylose levels creating mealy textures perfect for baking and lower amylopectin keeping waxy types firm in stews. This genetic wealth allowed adaptation to everything from sandy coastal soils to rocky highland slopes, proving the potato's remarkable resilience and versatility. Early healers even incorporated potato preparations into remedies, using mashed tubers as soothing poultices for wounds or inflamed joints, or fermented takash to ease stomach ailments, recognizing its anti-inflammatory compounds long before modern science confirmed them. Through all these centuries, the potato remained a quiet revolution, quietly powering the growth of civilizations that built monumental stone cities and intricate road networks across one of the world's most challenging terrains. Its ability to produce more calories per acre than most grains, to grow in poor soils with minimal water once established, and to survive storage that no other staple could match made it the ultimate survival crop. Communities learned to rotate fields with nitrogen-fixing legumes to keep soils healthy, to hill up earth around growing plants to protect developing tubers from light and frost, and to select seed potatoes from the healthiest plants each season, practices that ensured bountiful yields year after year. The plant's flowers, though beautiful, were secondary to the underground bounty, and the small green fruits that followed were rarely eaten but occasionally saved for planting when tubers were scarce. Even the leaves, though mildly toxic like the rest of the nightshade family, found occasional use in controlled medicinal applications after proper drying and preparation. As empires rose and fell along the spine of the Andes, the potato stood constant, its tubers feeding miners extracting silver from deep veins, sustaining pilgrims on sacred journeys, and nourishing children whose strong bones and clear minds owed much to its steady supply of minerals and vitamins. The freeze-drying technique for chuño spread from the Altiplano to coastal valleys and southern archipelagos, where Mapuche and Chono peoples cultivated their own hardy varieties suited to cooler, wetter climates, pushing the southern limit of agriculture ever farther. In every household, the aroma of boiling potatoes signaled the start of meals that brought families together, while surplus harvests fueled trade networks exchanging tubers for salt, textiles, and exotic feathers from distant lowlands. The potato's quiet presence shaped calendars, with planting and harvest times marking the rhythm of life, and its yields determined whether communities could expand or had to huddle closer during lean years. The qualities that first drew those ancient eyes to the soil continue to define the potato to this day. Its earthy flavor that absorbs spices and broths so readily, its ability to be transformed from simple boiled staple to creamy mash or crisp preparation through nothing more than heat and time, and its unparalleled efficiency in turning sunlight, water, and soil into edible energy. Yet even as these early societies mastered its cultivation and celebrated its gifts, they remained mindful of its potential hazards, teaching each new generation to avoid green tubers, to cook thoroughly, and to balance its starchy richness with other fresh foods. The potato had become far more than a wild find or a seasonal treat. It was the foundation upon which entire ways of life were built, a living link between the harsh mountain earth and the resilient human spirit that learned to coax abundance from it. So the potato's ancient chapter in the high Andes drew to a close only to open onto new horizons, its tubers ready to travel far beyond the lakes and peaks that had nurtured it for millennia, carrying with them the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who had first unlocked its secrets. The journey that began with cautious bites by fireside was about to expand in ways no one could have imagined, spreading its nourishing power across continents and into the daily lives of people everywhere. The journey that began with cautious bites by fireside was about to expand in ways no one could have imagined, spreading its nourishing power across continents and into the daily lives of people everywhere. It happened when Spanish explorers, pushing deep into the rugged highlands during their campaigns of the early 16th century, first encountered fields blanketed with low-growing plants bearing clusters of small, knobby tubers unlike anything they had seen before. These men, accustomed to the grains and roots of their homeland, watched local farmers harvest the strange vegetables and tasted them after simple boiling or roasting. The flavor was earthy and satisfying, the texture hearty, and the fullness it provided lasted through long days of travel and labor. Curious about this new discovery, the explorers collected a few tubers along with other treasures and loaded them aboard their ships for the long voyage back across the ocean. Some were likely carried as provisions, others as curiosities or even ballast, but those humble loads carried the genetic foundation for a revolution that would reshape diets across entire continents within a few generations. The first potatoes to reach European soil arrived around the middle of the 16th century, probably landing first in the ports of southern Spain near Seville. Early records show them appearing on tables in a hospital there by 1573, where they were served to patients as a nourishing, easily digested food during times when other supplies ran short. From Spain, the tubers traveled quickly through trade networks and royal exchanges. They reached Italy shortly afterward, then the Low Countries and parts of Central Europe by the late 1580s. Botanists and herbalists took special interest, planting small plots in gardens and studying the plant's unusual growth. One prominent scholar, Carolus Clusius, received specimens through papal connections and successfully grew them in Vienna, Frankfurt, and later in the Netherlands, documenting their progress and sharing seeds with fellow scientists. Another early description appeared in an English herbal published in 1597, complete with an illustration that captured the plant's distinctive leaves and flowers, though the writer mistakenly believed the vegetable originated in a distant colony rather than the high mountains where it truly began. Yet acceptance was far from immediate. The potato belonged to the nightshade family, a group that included plants long viewed with suspicion because some relatives produced poisonous berries or leaves. Many Europeans looked at the new arrival and assumed it must share those dangerous traits. Rumors spread that eating potatoes could cause leprosy, sterility, or even invite the devil, because the edible part grew hidden underground rather than ripening openly in the sun like respectable grains. In some regions, the tubers were fed only to livestock or used as animal fodder, considered fit for pigs but beneath human dignity. Aristocrats sometimes grew them purely as ornamental flowers, admiring the delicate white, pink, or purple blooms that topped the leafy stems without ever tasting the bounty below. Gardeners struggled with the plant's preferences too. The original varieties were adapted to short days and high altitudes, so they flowered and formed tubers slowly under the longer summer daylight of northern latitudes. Yields remained modest at first, and the unfamiliar cultivation methods left many farmers puzzled about when to plant, how deep to bury the seed pieces, and how to protect the emerging shoots from late frosts. Despite these obstacles, a few forward-thinking observers began to recognize the potato's remarkable qualities. They noticed how a single acre could produce several times more edible weight than traditional grains like wheat or rye, especially in poor or rocky soils where other crops failed. The plant required little care once established, needing only occasional hilling of soil around the stems to encourage more tuber formation and to shield the developing crop from light. Harvests could be dug by hand or with simple tools, and the tubers stored for months in cool, dark cellars without spoiling quickly. When cooked, the potato offered a versatile base for meals. It could be boiled until fluffy, mashed with herbs, sliced and fried into crisp rounds, or added to stews to thicken the broth naturally with its own starch. Its mild flavor absorbed spices, broths, and fats beautifully, turning simple ingredients into satisfying dishes that stretched limited food supplies. As people experimented more boldly, the nutritional advantages became clearer with each passing decade. A typical serving delivered a steady supply of complex carbohydrates that released energy gradually, helping workers and travelers maintain strength without the sharp hunger pangs that followed lighter meals. The skin, often left on during cooking, contributed valuable fiber that supported digestion and helped regulate the body's internal processes. Potassium levels stood out as particularly impressive, supporting healthy fluid balance and proper muscle function, including the heart's steady rhythm. Vitamin C, present in meaningful amounts especially when eaten fresh, bolstered immunity and aided the absorption of iron from other foods. Vitamin B6 played its role in brain health and the creation of red blood cells, while smaller but useful quantities of magnesium, phosphorus, and manganese rounded out a mineral profile that complemented many traditional European diets. The protein inside, though modest in quantity, contained a balanced mix of essential amino acids, making the potato more nutritionally complete than many other root vegetables. Colored varieties with their red, blue, or yellow flesh carried extra antioxidants such as polyphenols and carotenoids that help protect cells from everyday wear and tear. Cooks also discovered practical tricks that enhanced these benefits. Allowing boiled potatoes to cool before eating increased the formation of resistant starch, a special type of carbohydrate that behaved more like fiber in the gut, feeding beneficial bacteria and promoting digestive comfort. When potatoes were prepared with their skins intact, the nutrient retention was highest, and the natural earthiness added depth to every bite. Farmers learned that rotating potato fields with legumes helped restore soil nutrients, while careful selection of the healthiest tubers for replanting improved yields year after year. In cooler, moist climates, the crop thrived particularly well, producing reliable harvests even in marginal lands that had previously lain fallow. Still, the potato carried clear drawbacks that required respect and careful handling. The same nightshade chemistry that protected the plant in the wild meant that any tubers exposed to sunlight turned green and developed higher concentrations of bitter glycoalkaloids. Eating those green parts in quantity could cause stomach cramps, headaches, or more serious discomfort, so households learned to store harvests in complete darkness and to discard any sprouts or discolored pieces. Raw potatoes offered little nourishment because their starch resisted digestion until heat broke it down, and overeating large quantities sometimes led to bloating or gas because of the high fiber and resistant starch content. In times of poor storage, mold or rot could spoil entire cellars, teaching the importance of ventilation and regular inspection. Later, when potatoes were cooked at very high temperatures such as deep frying or prolonged roasting, another concern emerged: the formation of acrylamide, a compound created when starches and certain amino acids react under intense heat. While not an immediate danger in moderate amounts, awareness grew that repeated heavy consumption of such preparations might carry longer-term considerations, encouraging cooks to vary their methods and balance fried dishes with gentler preparations. The high carbohydrate nature of the potato also meant it could cause a relatively rapid rise in blood sugar when eaten alone, a factor that required moderation for those with sensitive digestion or energy needs. Some individuals noticed mild allergic responses or digestive sensitivity, though these were rare compared to the vegetable's overall tolerability. Dependence on a single crop carried its own risks, as entire regions would later discover when disease struck. Yet for most people in those early centuries, the practical advantages far outweighed the manageable hazards. The potato's ability to grow where grains struggled, to store through winter, and to feed more mouths per plot of land slowly won over skeptics. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, influential figures began actively promoting the crop. In one northern kingdom, a ruler ordered potatoes planted on royal estates and encouraged subjects to follow suit, recognizing how the vegetable could stabilize food supplies during lean years. Another monarch in the East issued decrees urging widespread cultivation, even distributing seed tubers to peasants and offering incentives for successful harvests. In France, a pharmacist who had survived on potatoes during wartime captivity mounted a clever campaign, posting guards around royal potato fields to create an aura of value and exclusivity. Once the public believed the crop was prized by the elite, interest surged. Chefs at court developed elegant recipes featuring potatoes, transforming the once scorned tuber into a fashionable ingredient that appeared in elegant mashes, elegant gratins, and delicate soups. Nowhere did the potato find a more welcoming home than in the cool, damp fields of Ireland, where it arrived around the 1580s. The climate proved ideal, with mild winters and sufficient rainfall allowing the crop to mature reliably. Farmers discovered they could grow potatoes on tiny plots of land, often between rocks or on reclaimed bogs, yielding enough to feed a family of 6 from just 1 acre. The vegetable became the foundation of daily meals, boiled or roasted, sometimes mixed with milk or cabbage for added nourishment. Populations grew rapidly as food security improved, with entire communities relying on the potato's abundance to support larger households and more livestock. Storage in simple pits or thatched clamps kept tubers sound through the winter, and surplus could be fed to animals or sold at market. This reliance, while bringing prosperity for generations, also planted the seeds of vulnerability that would reveal themselves dramatically later when a single disease swept through the fields. Across the rest of the continent, the pattern repeated more gradually. In the Low Countries in Germany, peasants cleared marginal lands and planted potatoes between rows of grain, doubling their output without sacrificing other crops. In eastern regions, the tuber reached Russia by the mid-19th century, where vast plains proved perfectly suited to large-scale production. Even in warmer southern areas, farmers adapted varieties that matured faster or tolerated drier conditions. The potato's genetic flexibility allowed it to evolve alongside its new homes. Over 2 centuries, the original short-day types gradually shifted toward long-day flowering through natural selection and careful seed saving, producing strains better matched to European seasons. Culinary traditions blossomed in each region. In one country, the potato became the heart of hearty stews thickened with its own starch and flavored with local herbs. In another, it was shredded and fried into golden pancakes served with sour cream. Bakers experimented with potato flour in breads and pastries, discovering how the natural moisture kept loaves soft for days. Distillers found that potatoes yielded a smooth spirit when fermented and distilled, adding another economic use for surplus harvests. The plant's starch proved valuable beyond the kitchen, too, serving as a thickener in sauces, a sizing agent for textiles, and even an ingredient in early papermaking and adhesives. As the 18th century drew to a close, the potato had moved from curiosity to staple across much of the continent. Its yield supported growing cities and industrial workforces, its nutrition sustained soldiers and laborers, and its affordability helped ease the pressures of rising populations. Yet the story was far from finished. New challenges and opportunities awaited as the crop continued its march eastward and southward, encountering fresh climates, new diseases, and innovative farming methods that would carry it into the modern age. The same resilient tuber that had once sustained ancient mountain civilizations now stood ready to feed the expanding world, its quiet power still unfolding in ways that would touch every corner of human life. The same resilient tuber that had once sustained ancient mountain civilizations now stood ready to feed the expanding world, its quiet power still unfolding in ways that would touch every corner of human life. The 19th century marked the moment when that power was tested in the harshest possible way, revealing both the potato's extraordinary capacity to sustain life and the terrible dangers that arise when an entire society places all its trust in a single crop. In the cool, misty fields of Ireland, the potato had become more than food. It was the heartbeat of daily existence. Small tenant farmers, working plots often no larger than an acre or two, discovered they could harvest enough tubers from that tiny space to feed a family of 8 or 10 for an entire year, sometimes with enough left over to fatten a pig or trade for rent. They planted a single reliable variety, the lumper, known for its heavy yields and ability to grow in poor, boggy soil where nothing else would thrive. The plants grew vigorously, their hairy stems reaching knee-high, their pinnate leaves catching the frequent rains, and their clusters of white flowers signaling that beneath the soil a treasure was forming. Each hill could produce dozens of smooth, white-skinned tubers, some as large as a man's fist, packed with the starch that turned into warmth and strength when boiled in iron pots over peat fires. For decades, this system worked beautifully. Populations rose dramatically because the potato provided more calories per acre than any grain, and its short growing season allowed 2 crops in some milder districts. Families ate potatoes morning, noon, and night, boiled whole with a pinch of salt, mashed with buttermilk when it was available, or baked in the embers until the skins crackled and the flesh became fluffy and sweet. The skin itself was never wasted. It supplied fiber that kept digestion regular and helped prevent the constipation that plagued diets heavy in refined grains. Children grew strong on the potassium that supported their developing muscles and bones, while adults found steady energy from the complex carbohydrates that released slowly throughout long days of labor. The vitamin C content, though modest by modern standards, was enough to ward off scurvy in a population that rarely saw fresh fruit. Even the flowers, though seldom noticed, added a quiet beauty to the landscape, their delicate petals trembling in the Atlantic winds. Yet this beautiful dependence contained a hidden weakness. Because almost every field grew the same variety, the crop had almost no genetic diversity. When a new and terrible disease arrived in the summer of 1845, carried on the winds from distant ports where infected tubers had been unknowingly shipped, the potato plants had no defense. The culprit was a microscopic water mold called Phytophthora infestans, an organism that thrived in the cool, wet weather Ireland knew so well. It began with small dark spots on the leaves that quickly spread, turning the foliage into a blackened, slimy mess overnight. Spores washed down into the soil, infecting the developing tubers and turning them into a foul-smelling, watery pulp that could not be eaten. Within weeks, entire fields that had promised abundance lay ruined. Farmers who dug up their crop in hope found only black, shriveled lumps that dissolved into stench when touched. The disease moved with terrifying speed. One week a field looked healthy, the next it was a scene of devastation. The first year brought hardship, but not yet catastrophe. Some districts escaped the worst, and people stretched their remaining stores with wild greens and whatever grain they could beg or borrow. But 1846 was far worse. The blight returned earlier and more fiercely. By late summer, the smell of rotting potatoes hung over the countryside like a funeral shroud. People who had never known real hunger now faced it on a scale that defied imagination. Families watched their last reserves turn to black slime in the storage pits. Children cried for food that no longer existed. The elderly grew too weak to leave their cabins. In the space of a few months, what had been a land of modest plenty became a landscape of despair. Typhus and relapsing fever followed the starvation, spread by people weakened beyond resistance, their bodies unable to fight infections that the potato's own nutrients had once helped keep at bay. The human cost was staggering. More than 1 million souls perished from starvation and disease in less than 6 years. Another million fled the island, carrying with them the memory of the potato both as savior and betrayer. Those who remained learned bitter lessons that would echo through agricultural science for centuries. They learned that monoculture invites disaster. They learned that storing tubers in damp conditions encourages the very mold that destroys them. They learned to inspect every seed potato for the slightest sign of infection and to plant smaller plots of several different varieties so that if one failed, others might survive. They learned to hill the soil higher and to rotate crops with nitrogen-fixing clover and beans to restore the earth's vitality. And they learned that even the hardiest plant can become a liability when it is asked to carry the entire weight of a people's survival. Yet out of that tragedy came renewal. In the decades that followed, farmers and scientists across Europe began a systematic search for new potato varieties that could resist the blight. They crossed the surviving Andean landraces, still grown in distant high valleys, with European strains. They selected seedlings that showed even slight tolerance to the mold, saving their tubers and replanting year after year. Slowly, hardier varieties emerged, some with rougher skins that seemed to shed water better, others with deeper eyes that protected the flesh, still others that matured faster and escaped the worst of the late summer rains. One particularly successful line produced tubers with a slightly yellowish flesh, richer in carotenoids that gave the cooked potato a warm golden hue and added subtle sweetness. These new potatoes not only survived the blight better but yielded more reliably, allowing the population to recover and even expand once more. The lessons of Ireland traveled quickly. In the Great Plains of Prussia and the fertile river valleys of Poland, rulers who had already encouraged potato growing now ordered the creation of seed banks and experimental farms. They distributed blight-resistant seed tubers to peasants and offered prizes for the best new varieties. In Russia, the crop pushed eastward across vast steppes, its ability to grow in short summers and poor soils making it ideal for the short growing season of the north. Farmers there learned to store tubers in underground cellars lined with straw, where the constant cool temperature kept them firm and sweet for months. They discovered that freezing a few tubers intentionally created a primitive form of chuño, the ancient Andean technique, giving them a dried product that could last through the long winters when roads were impassable. As the century progressed, the potato's culinary role deepened in every region it touched. In the Low Countries, cooks perfected the art of double frying thin strips of potato in hot fat, creating crisp golden batons that became a beloved street food. The high starch content allowed the exterior to brown beautifully while the interior stayed fluffy. In Germany and Austria, the tubers were grated raw, squeezed of excess moisture, and mixed with egg and flour to form light dumplings that floated in rich broths or were served alongside roasted meats. The natural gluten-free quality of potato starch made these dumplings tender and digestible for those who struggled with wheat. In Scandinavia, the potato was boiled and then chilled, sliced, and dressed with vinegar and dill to create refreshing salads that balanced the heaviness of preserved fish. Each culture found its own way to coax new flavors and textures from the same humble tuber. Industrial uses multiplied as well. Factories began extracting pure starch from surplus potatoes, a white powder so fine it felt like silk between the fingers. This starch thickened sauces without lumps, stiffened fabrics for weaving, and even served as the base for early glues and sizing agents in papermaking. Distilleries fermented potatoes into clear spirits whose smooth character came from the balanced sugars released during mashing. The leftover pulp became nutritious feed for cattle, closing the loop between field and farmyard. Scientists began measuring exactly what the potato delivered to the body. They confirmed that 100 grams of boiled potato with skin provided nearly 400 milligrams of potassium, more than a banana, helping regulate blood pressure and muscle function. The vitamin B6 content supported the nervous system, while the folate in the skin aided cell division and repair. When potatoes were allowed to cool after cooking, a portion of their starch turned into resistant starch, acting like fiber in the gut, feeding beneficial bacteria, and producing short-chain fatty acids that supported colon health. Yet the drawbacks remained ever-present, demanding respect. Green tubers, formed when light reached the soil through cracks, still carried elevated levels of solanine that could cause nausea and neurological discomfort if eaten in quantity. Sprouted potatoes required careful trimming of the eyes and the bitter flesh beneath them. Over-reliance on fried preparations created other concerns. When potatoes were sliced thin and cooked at high temperatures, a compound called acrylamide could form from the reaction between sugars and amino acids. While not an immediate poison, its presence encouraged cooks to moderate their use of very high-heat methods and to balance deep-fried dishes with gentler boiling or steaming. The high glycemic impact of plain mashed potatoes could cause rapid rises in blood sugar, teaching the value of pairing them with proteins, fats, and fiber-rich vegetables to slow digestion. In some soils, repeated potato cropping without rotation depleted nutrients and encouraged pests such as wireworms and nematodes, whose larvae tunneled through the tubers and ruined entire harvests. Farmers learned to plant marigolds between rows as a natural deterrent and to allow fields to rest under clover for a season. By the closing decades of the 19th century, the potato had crossed mountain ranges and oceans to reach new continents. In the highlands of India, British administrators and local farmers alike planted the crop in terraced fields that echoed the Andes where it began. The cool nights of the Himalayan foothills proved perfect, and soon varieties with red and blue skins were growing alongside traditional grains. In China, the potato found a home in the northern provinces, where its drought tolerance and high yield helped feed growing populations on marginal lands. Farmers there developed techniques for intercropping potatoes with maize, allowing both crops to share the same field and double the food produced from each plot of ground. Even in the drier regions of North Africa and the Middle East, irrigated potato fields began to appear, their tubers providing a reliable vegetable when summer heat withered other plants. The same resilient tuber that had survived the blight's devastation and the lessons of monoculture now carried with it a new spirit of scientific curiosity. Breeders collected pollen from flowers of different varieties and carefully brushed it onto the stigmas of chosen mother plants, producing thousands of tiny seeds that were planted in nursery beds. From those seedlings, they selected the best performers, those with resistance to disease, higher starch for better frying, richer flavor, or unusual colors that delighted the eye. Each successful cross added another layer to the potato's genetic story, ensuring that future generations would have even more reliable harvests. Agricultural societies published pamphlets describing the best planting depths, the ideal spacing of seed pieces, and the proper timing of harvest before the first hard frosts. Schools taught children how to recognize healthy tubers and how to store them safely. The potato had become not merely a food but a subject of study, a partner in human progress, and a reminder that even the simplest plant holds secrets that reward patience and care. Yet the story was far from complete. As the 20th century approached, new challenges and astonishing possibilities lay ahead. Scientists would soon unlock the potato's genetic code. Engineers would design machines that could harvest hundreds of acres in a day, and cooks would invent entirely new ways to transform the tuber into delights that would delight palates around the globe. The quiet power that had once fed ancient mountain peoples was now poised to nourish billions, its journey of discovery and adaptation entering a modern chapter filled with both promise and continued respect for the plant's delicate balance of gifts and demands. the same resilient tuber that had once survived the blight's devastation, and the lessons of monoculture now carried with it a new spirit of scientific curiosity. Breeders collected pollen from flowers of different varieties and carefully brushed it onto the stigmas of chosen mother plants, producing thousands of tiny seeds that were planted in nursery beds. From those seedlings, they selected the best performers, those with resistance to disease, higher starch for better frying, richer flavor, or unusual colors that delighted the eye. Each successful cross added another layer to the potato's genetic story, ensuring that future generations would have even more reliable harvests. Agricultural societies published pamphlets describing the best planting depths, the ideal spacing of seed pieces, and the proper timing of harvest before the first hard frosts. Schools taught children how to recognize healthy tubers and how to store them safely. The potato had become not merely a food but a subject of study, a partner in human progress, and a reminder that even the simplest plant holds secrets that reward patience and care. As the 20th century opened, the pace of discovery accelerated dramatically. Laboratories began examining the potato under microscopes, identifying the exact structures within its cells that governed starch accumulation, tuber formation, and resistance to pathogens. Researchers mapped the chromosomes, counting 48 in diploid varieties, and realizing that many cultivated types were actually tetraploids, carrying 4 sets of genetic material instead of the usual 2. This extra genetic material explained the potato's remarkable adaptability. It allowed for greater variation in traits and made it easier for breeders to combine desirable characteristics from distant relatives. One particularly important breakthrough came when scientists recognized that wild species growing in remote valleys still held genes for late blight resistance that had been lost in domesticated lines during centuries of selection for yield and taste. Expeditions returned with seed packets filled with tiny berries harvested from those wild plants, and breeders began the painstaking process of crossing them back into cultivated varieties without losing the good eating qualities already achieved. The results began appearing in fields during the 1920s and 1930s. New cultivars emerged with names that reflected their creators' pride or their intended purpose. Some produced long, smooth tubers ideal for cutting into uniform fries that would crisp evenly in hot oil. Others formed round, white-fleshed potatoes perfect for mashing into creamy clouds that held butter and cream without becoming gluey. A few early experiments yielded varieties with naturally golden flesh, richer in beta-carotene, giving the cooked potato a warm, buttery appearance even without added fat. Farmers welcomed these newcomers because they often matured a week or 2 earlier than older types, allowing harvest before the heaviest autumn rains could encourage rot. Yields climbed steadily. Where a good field once produced 10 tons per hectare, improved varieties routinely delivered 20 or more, sometimes reaching 30 under favorable conditions with careful fertilization and irrigation. Mechanization transformed cultivation at the same time. Horse-drawn plows gave way to tractors that could prepare large fields in hours rather than days. Specialized planters dropped seed pieces at precise intervals, covering them with just the right depth of soil to encourage strong stems and deep tuber sets. Diggers replaced back-breaking hand labor. Rotating tines lifted the entire row, shaking off most of the earth so that only clean tubers rolled onto sorting belts. In larger operations, conveyor systems carried the harvest directly into ventilated trucks that rushed it to cool storage sheds, where temperatures hovered just above freezing and humidity stayed high enough to prevent shriveling. These controlled environments extended shelf life dramatically. Tubers harvested in September could remain firm and sprout-free until the following May or June, providing a year-round supply for markets and processors. Processing industries grew alongside the farms. In the 1920s and 1930s, entrepreneurs perfected methods for slicing potatoes paper thin, frying them briefly to set the structure, then dehydrating them to produce the first commercial crisp snacks. The high starch content proved ideal. It allowed the slices to puff and crisp without collapsing when finished in hot oil at the point of consumption. Other factories focused on frozen French fries. They blanched peeled tubers in hot water to inactivate enzymes that would otherwise cause browning, cut them into uniform strips, partially fried them to develop color and flavor, then flash froze the pieces at extremely low temperatures. When cooked from frozen, these strips emerged golden and tender inside with a satisfying crunch outside, revolutionizing the way people enjoyed potatoes away from home. Dehydrated mashed potato flakes appeared next, made by cooking whole tubers, ricing them through fine screens, drying the mash into thin sheets, and grinding the sheets back into powder. A cook needed only to add hot water, milk, and butter to recreate the creamy side dish in minutes, a convenience that proved especially valuable during times when fresh produce was scarce. The nutritional understanding deepened with each decade. Chemists quantified exactly how much resistant starch formed when potatoes were boiled and then cooled overnight in the refrigerator. This retrograded starch resisted breakdown in the small intestine, passing instead to the large bowel where gut bacteria fermented it into beneficial short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate. These compounds nourished the cells lining the colon, supported a balanced microbiome, and contributed to feelings of fullness that lasted longer than simple sugars. Researchers also measured the bioavailability of the potato's potassium, confirming that it was absorbed almost as efficiently as the potassium found in leafy greens or bananas. The vitamin C content, though reduced by cooking, remained significant when potatoes were steamed or boiled in their skins rather than peeled and soaked beforehand. Polyphenols concentrated in the skin and just beneath it acted as antioxidants, helping neutralize free radicals generated during normal metabolism or exposure to environmental stresses. Cooks around the world continued to invent new ways to highlight these qualities. In one region, the potato was grated raw, mixed with onion and bound with egg, then fried into golden latkes served with applesauce or sour cream. The natural sugars in the raw flesh caramelized at the edges, creating crisp contrast against the soft interior. In another tradition, tubers were thinly sliced, layered with cream and cheese in a shallow dish, then baked slowly until the top turned golden and bubbly, the starch from the potatoes thickening the cream into a velvety sauce that bound everything together. Street vendors in bustling cities perfected spirals cut from whole potatoes, skewered them, and lowered them into vats of hot oil until the edges curled and crisped while the center stayed tender. Home cooks discovered that roasting small whole potatoes at high heat after parboiling created a rough, crunchy exterior surrounding fluffy interiors, especially when the skins were scored and coated lightly with oil and coarse salt. Yet every advance brought renewed awareness of the potato's limitations. Late blight never disappeared entirely. Even resistant varieties could succumb under prolonged wet conditions that favored the pathogen's sporulation. Farmers therefore continued rotating fields, applying copper-based sprays when forecasts predicted danger periods, and destroying infected foliage quickly to reduce spore loads. Colorado potato beetles, with their distinctive black and yellow striped bodies, developed resistance to early insecticides, forcing growers to alternate chemical classes and integrate biological controls such as predatory insects or Bacillus thuringiensis preparations targeting the larvae. Wireworms, the soil-dwelling larvae of click beetles, bored through developing tubers, leaving narrow tunnels that invited secondary rot. Crop rotation with non-host plants and soil treatments helped keep populations in check. In storage, soft rot bacteria and ring rot could devastate entire warehouses if a single infected tuber was overlooked, underscoring the need for rigorous inspection, ventilation, and temperature management. During the middle decades of the century, the potato played a critical role in feeding populations through periods of upheaval. In war-torn regions where grain fields were destroyed or transport disrupted, potato plots in back gardens and along roadsides provided calories when little else was available. The tuber's ability to grow in almost any soil, mature in 90 to 120 days, and store without refrigeration made them an emergency crop par excellence. Governments encouraged victory gardens that included potatoes, distributing certified seed pieces to households and teaching basic cultivation techniques. After conflicts ended, surplus harvests from these small plots helped stabilize food supplies while larger commercial farms rebuilt their capacity. The 1950s and 1960s brought another wave of transformation. Tissue culture techniques allowed scientists to produce disease-free starting material. A tiny piece of shoot tip, grown in sterile nutrient medium under precise light and temperature, developed into plantlets free of viruses that had accumulated over generations of vegetative propagation. These clean starters were then multiplied in greenhouses before being transferred to fields, dramatically reducing the incidence of virus-induced yield losses. Hybrid true potato seed began to appear experimentally. Instead of planting tubers, farmers could sow seeds that produced uniform, vigorous plants with hybrid vigor. Though true seed potatoes remained challenging because of variable germination and longer time to maturity, the approach promised eventual freedom from tuber-borne diseases. Genetic modification entered the conversation in the closing decades of the century. Researchers inserted genes that conferred resistance to specific insects or viruses, or that silenced enzymes responsible for bruising and black spot during mechanical harvest. One variety produced tubers that accumulated less acrylamide during high-temperature frying, addressing a long-standing concern about that processing byproduct. Another line expressed natural insect repellent compounds borrowed from unrelated plants, reducing the need for chemical sprays. Public acceptance varied widely. Some welcomed the potential for higher yields and lower pesticide use, while others worried about unintended ecological effects or long-term safety. The debates encouraged rigorous testing protocols and transparent labeling so consumers could make informed choices. Meanwhile, conventional breeding continued to deliver impressive results. Varieties appeared with naturally high anthocyanin content, turning the flesh vivid purple or deep red, and delivering potent antioxidants that protected cells from oxidative damage. Others were developed specifically for processing, with low reducing sugars that minimized darkening during frying and produced consistently light-colored products. Fingerling types gained popularity for their waxy texture and thin, colorful skins that looked attractive when roasted whole or boiled and tossed in vinaigrette. New cultivars matured in as little as 70 days, opening potato production to regions with shorter growing seasons, while others tolerated heat stress better, expanding cultivation into warmer climates previously considered marginal. The potato's journey through the 20th century thus blended ancient resilience with modern precision. It fed billions during times of scarcity, nourished industrial societies during times of plenty, and adapted to every innovation thrown at it from the tractor to the gene gun. Yet at every step the plant reminded growers and eaters alike of its dual nature, a source of astonishing abundance when understood and respected, a source of vulnerability when taken for granted. The 21st century would inherit this complex legacy, carrying the potato into an era of climate shifts, precision agriculture, global supply chains, and renewed appreciation for nutrient-dense, sustainably grown food. The tubers that once sustained mountain villagers now sat on supermarket shelves in dozens of forms, each one carrying forward the same quiet power that had first caught the eye of those long-ago foragers high in the Andes. And so the story continued to unfold, entering a new chapter where technology, tradition, and the unchanging needs of the human body would once again reshape the potato's place in daily life, ensuring that its gifts and its cautions remained as relevant as ever. The tubers that once sustained mountain villagers now sat on supermarket shelves in dozens of forms, each one carrying forward the same quiet power that had first caught the eye of those long-ago foragers high in the Andes. And so the story continued to unfold, entering a new chapter where technology, tradition, and the unchanging needs of the human body would once again reshape the potato's place in daily life, ensuring that its gifts and its cautions remained as relevant as ever. When the calendar turned to the 21st century, the potato entered an era of unprecedented scrutiny, acceleration, and global reconnection. Climate patterns began shifting in measurable ways: wetter springs in some growing regions, longer dry spells in others, earlier springs followed by unpredictable late frosts. Breeders responded by intensifying efforts to develop varieties that could withstand these new stresses. They screened thousands of seedlings each year for heat tolerance, allowing plants to set tubers even when daytime temperatures climbed above 35 degrees Celsius for extended periods. Others focused on drought resilience, selecting lines whose root systems penetrated deeper or whose leaves closed their stomata more efficiently to conserve water during prolonged dry spells. Salt tolerance became another priority in areas where irrigation water carried increasing mineral loads. Certain wild relatives from coastal Andean zones donated genes that let domesticated plants exclude excess sodium from their tissues, while still accumulating the potassium they needed for tuber swelling. Precision agriculture arrived as a powerful ally. Satellite imagery now mapped soil moisture, nitrogen levels, and plant health across entire fields down to square-meter resolution. Sensors buried in the ground transmitted real-time data on volumetric water content and electrical conductivity, allowing irrigation systems to deliver exactly the amount needed, no more, no less. Variable rate planters adjusted the spacing and depth of seed pieces on the fly according to soil maps, placing more robust starts in poorer patches and tighter spacing where fertility was high. Drones equipped with multispectral cameras flew low over the crop, detecting the subtle shift in leaf reflectance that signaled the earliest stages of late blight or nutrient deficiency long before symptoms were visible to the human eye. When an anomaly appeared, automated sprayers targeted only the affected zones with fungicide, reducing chemical use by 80% or more in many operations while keeping disease pressure low. Mechanized harvest reached new levels of gentleness and speed. Self-propelled harvesters wider than some village streets lifted 4 or 6 rows at once, their adjustable sieves and conveyors calibrated to minimize bruising. Optical sorters scanned every tuber under bright lights and multiple wavelengths, ejecting those with green spots, cuts, or disease lesions while letting perfect specimens continue to the packing line. In the largest facilities, entire harvests moved from field to climate-controlled warehouse in under 24 hours, preserving the crisp texture and nutrient profile that degrade quickly once tubers are exposed to warm air and light. Storage science advanced in parallel. Modern facilities used computer-controlled atmospheres that lowered oxygen to 3% and raised carbon dioxide to suppress sprouting without chemicals. Ethylene scrubbers removed even trace amounts of the ripening hormone that could trigger premature sprouting in neighboring tubers. Temperature gradients were fine-tuned so that the warmest air rose and escaped while the coolest settled around the crop, maintaining a steady 4 to 7 degrees Celsius with 95% relative humidity. Some warehouses experimented with intermittent ultraviolet light treatments that killed surface pathogens without penetrating deep enough to affect eating quality. The result was that potatoes harvested in autumn could reach supermarket bins the following July still firm, unshriveled, and virtually sprout-free, extending the natural storage life far beyond what ancient Andean pits or 19th century cellars could achieve. Global trade networks knit these improvements together. Seed tubers certified free of viruses and nematodes traveled by refrigerated container from breeding stations in northern Europe to trial plots in southern Africa, from research fields in the Pacific Northwest to commercial farms in the highlands of Central Asia. True potato seed technology matured enough to enter commercial use in a few regions. Hybrid seeds planted directly in the field produced vigorous, uniform stands with built-in resistance packages, eliminating the need to transport bulky tubers and reducing the risk of spreading tuber-borne diseases across borders. In areas too remote or too warm for traditional seed potato multiplication, tissue culture plantlets were airlifted in sterile trays, hardened off in local nurseries, and transplanted to give farmers a clean, high-yielding start. The nutritional narrative grew richer and more nuanced. Large cohort studies tracked dietary patterns over decades and consistently found that regular potato consumption, especially when prepared with minimal added fat and eaten with the skin, was associated with favorable outcomes for blood pressure, thanks to the high potassium to sodium ratio. When potatoes replaced more refined carbohydrate sources in the diet, markers of inflammation tended to improve, likely because of the fiber, resistant starch, and polyphenols working together. Controlled feeding trials showed that a meal containing cooled, cooked potatoes produced a lower overall glycemic response than the same caloric amount of white rice or white bread, particularly when paired with protein and healthy fats. The gut microbiome responded positively to the resistant starch fraction, with increases in butyrate-producing species that supported intestinal barrier function and immune regulation. Public health messages began to reflect this balanced view. Dietary guidelines in many countries moved away from blanket warnings against starchy vegetables and instead emphasized preparation method and portion context. Steamed or boiled potatoes with skins on, roasted with a light brush of oil, or mashed with broth rather than heavy cream were positioned as nutrient-dense choices. The message became clear. The potato itself was not the problem. The company it kept, deep fryers, excessive butter, oversized portions, was where caution was needed. Culinary creativity exploded in this environment of abundance and awareness. Chefs rediscovered heirloom varieties that had nearly vanished during the push for uniform processing types. Purple-fleshed cultivars with names evoking their Andean origins appeared on fine dining menus, their vivid color retained through gentle steaming and showcased in salads with bright herbs and citrus. Waxy fingerlings were halved lengthwise, roasted cut side down until the edges caramelized, then finished with smoked salt and fresh rosemary. Home cooks embraced sheet pan dinners where cubed potatoes, roasted alongside root vegetables, chicken thighs, and hearty greens, the natural starches creating a flavorful glaze as moisture evaporated. Spiralized potatoes replaced grain-based noodles in lighter dishes, their texture holding up well when quickly blanched and tossed with pesto or tomato sauce. Dehydrated potato slices seasoned with spices became a popular oven-baked snack, offering crunch without the oil load of traditional crisps. Street food vendors pushed boundaries further. In one bustling market, whole potatoes were scored deeply in a spiral, skewered, and submerged in hot oil until they bloomed into golden accordions with hundreds of crisp edges surrounding a tender core. Another innovation saw mashed potato piped into nests, chilled, then fried until the outside turned shatteringly crisp while the inside remained creamy. Fermentation enthusiasts experimented with potato kvass and potato sourdough starters, discovering that the natural yeasts and bacteria on the skins could produce tangy, complex flavors when coaxed properly. In regions where rice or maize had long dominated, potato flatbreads gained followers. Thin discs of mashed potato mixed with chickpea flour or millet, griddled until spotted with char and served with chutneys or yogurt dips. Sustainability became a central concern as the century progressed. Life cycle assessments compared the potato's environmental footprint to other staples. Grown with modern water-efficient practices, it required far less irrigation per calorie than many grains in arid zones. Its short growing cycle meant fields could be double-cropped or rotated quickly, reducing the time land lay bare and vulnerable to erosion. Cover crops planted immediately after harvest captured residual nutrients and built soil organic matter for the next season. Integrated pest management programs that combined resistant varieties, trap crops, beneficial insects, and targeted sprays kept chemical applications low. Organic producers demonstrated that high yields were possible without synthetic inputs by using compost teas, biofertilizers, and strategic companion planting, marigolds to deter nematodes, nasturtiums to lure aphids away from the main crop. Challenges persisted, of course. Emerging strains of late blight continued to evolve resistance to fungicides, requiring constant vigilance and the stacking of multiple resistance genes from wild relatives. New soil-borne pathogens appeared in intensively cropped areas, necessitating longer rotations or soil solarization in warmer climates. Extreme weather events, prolonged heat waves, unseasonal floods, hailstorms, wiped out promising fields in hours, reminding everyone that no variety was invincible. Supply chain disruptions exposed vulnerabilities in the global system. When shipping containers sat idle or fertilizer plants shut down, input costs soared and some regions faced shortages of certified seed. These episodes reinforced the value of local production and decentralized seed systems where farmers saved and exchanged their own tubers season after season. By the middle of the 21st century, the potato had become a quiet emblem of resilience in a warming world. Its ability to produce abundant, storable calories on marginal land, to adapt through breeding to new climatic realities, and to deliver meaningful nutrition with relatively modest resource demands gave it renewed importance. School gardens in urban areas taught children to plant, hill, and harvest their own small plots, connecting them to the same cycle that had sustained their distant ancestors. Community-supported agriculture schemes included weekly shares of colorful heirloom varieties alongside the familiar white and russet types. Restaurants highlighted field-to-fork stories, tracing a dish back to the specific farm and variety that grew it. Home preservation methods, canning diced potatoes in broth, pressure canning whole peeled tubers, freeze-drying mashed preparations, saw a revival as people sought greater control over their food supply. The plant's ancient qualities remained unchanged at the core. A freshly dug tuber still carried the faint scent of earth and chlorophyll. When cut open, its flesh revealed the same creamy white or golden interior packed with starch granules that would swell and soften under heat. The eyes still held the promise of new life, ready to sprout given warmth and moisture. The nutritional package, complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, potassium for heart and muscle function, vitamin C for immune support, fiber for digestive health, still delivered in every bite when prepared thoughtfully. The cautions persisted too: avoid green flesh, trim sprouts, cook thoroughly, vary cooking methods, balance portions with other foods, rotate crops in the garden. Respect for the potato had become second nature to those who grew it, cooked it, and ate it. And yet the story refused to stand still. As laboratories explored CRISPR editing for precise trait improvements, as vertical farms experimented with hydroponic potato towers under LED lights, as chefs collaborated with breeders to create varieties tailored to specific dishes, the potato continued its quiet evolution. It linked past to present, mountain village to megacity, ancient wisdom to cutting-edge science. The same resilient tuber that had once been carried across oceans in wooden ships now traveled in data packets, genomic sequences shared instantly around the globe, allowing a breakthrough in one hemisphere to benefit farmers in another within months. The journey that began with cautious bites by highland firesides had become a global conversation, one that balanced celebration of abundance with careful stewardship of limits. The potato remained what it had always been, a generous, forgiving, occasionally demanding companion in the human quest for nourishment. Its tubers, whether boiled simply in a rural kitchen or transformed into elaborate restaurant creations, still carried the same fundamental promise: they could feed, sustain, and surprise, provided they were met with knowledge, respect, and a measure of restraint. And so the chronicle of this remarkable plant stretches forward still, its next chapters waiting to be written by the hands that plant, the the minds that study, and the palates that savor, each new season adding another layer to a history that refuses to end. The journey that began with cautious bites by Highland firesides had become a global conversation, one that balanced celebration of abundance with careful stewardship of limits. The potato remained what it had always been, a generous, forgiving, occasionally demanding companion in the human quest for nourishment. Its tubers, whether boiled simply in a rural kitchen or transformed into elaborate restaurant creations, still carried the same fundamental promise: they could feed, sustain, and surprise, provided they were met with knowledge, respect, and a measure of restraint. And so the chronicle of this remarkable plant stretches forward still, its next chapters waiting to be written by the hands that plant, the minds that study, and the palates that savor, each new season adding another layer to a history that refuses to end. By the third decade of the 21st century, the potato found itself at the center of converging crises and converging hopes. Rising global temperatures pushed traditional growing zones poleward and upward in elevation. In regions once considered ideal cool, moist, long summer days, the heat waves lengthened, the dry spells deepened, and the erratic rainfall patterns turned reliable seasons into gambles. Breeders responded with urgency that echoed the post-blight fervor of the 19th century, but now armed with tools unimaginable to their predecessors. Genomic selection accelerated the pace. Instead of waiting years to see how thousands of seedlings performed in the field, laboratories could scan the DNA of young plants and predict with high accuracy which ones carried combinations of alleles for drought escape, heat shock protein expression, deeper root architecture, or enhanced water use efficiency. A single promising seedling, identified in a greenhouse tray through marker-assisted selection, could have its tissue cultured into hundreds of identical clones within months, then multiplied further in aeroponic systems that suspended roots in nutrient mist, producing thousands of mini tubers in a matter of weeks. These speed breeding techniques compressed generational time. What once took 8 to 10 years from initial cross to commercial release now sometimes happened in 3 to 4. New cultivars rolled out with names that signaled their purpose: heat wave, aquifer, resilience, solstice. One line, derived in part from a wild species collected on a windswept Andean ridge, maintained tuber set at night temperatures that previously would have halted bulking entirely. Another, crossed with a frost-tolerant relative from the high Puna, could shrug off a surprise dip to -4 degrees Celsius late in the season without significant yield penalty. Farmers in marginal zones planted these newcomers and watched yields hold steady where older varieties would have collapsed. Vertical and controlled environment production took root in urban fringes and arid interiors. In stacked hydroponic towers under full-spectrum LEDs, seed potatoes, actually small tissue culture plantlets, grew in rotating columns, their stolons encouraged to form tubers in nutrient film channels rather than soil. Light recipes tuned to mimic Andean day-length triggered tuberization early. Carbon dioxide enrichment at 1,000 parts per million boosted photosynthesis. Precise nutrient dosing eliminated deficiencies that once plagued field crops. These systems used 90% less water than conventional irrigation and produced year-round harvests in spaces no larger than a modest warehouse. The tubers emerged clean, uniform, and free of soil-borne pathogens, destined for premium fresh markets or immediate processing into premium dehydrated products. Critics pointed to the high energy cost of artificial lighting, yet proponents countered with data showing that renewables, solar panels on the same rooftops, could offset much of the demand, especially in sun-rich latitudes. In open fields, regenerative practices gained ground. Farmers who once plowed deeply now adopted minimum till or no-till methods, leaving last season's residues on the surface to protect soil from wind and rain. Cover crops clover, vetch, rye grew between potato seasons, fixing nitrogen, scavenging leftover nutrients, and feeding the microbial life that built soil structure. Compost teas brewed from on-farm materials were applied through drip lines, delivering beneficial bacteria and fungi directly to the root zone. Mycorrhizal inoculants help plants access phosphorus that would otherwise remain locked in the soil, reducing the need for mined fertilizers. When late blight pressure rose, decision support apps pulled weather station data, spore trap counts, and variety resistance scores to recommend spray timing with surgical precision, sometimes skipping applications entirely when risk stayed below threshold. The consumer side of the story evolved just as rapidly. Demand shifted toward transparency and story. Shoppers wanted to know not only the variety but the farm, the soil type, the irrigation source, the distance traveled. QR codes on bags linked to short videos of the grower walking the field, explaining why a particular cultivar was chosen for that season's conditions. Colorful mixes, purple, red, yellow, fingerling, became standard rather than novelty. People rediscovered the flavor differences. The nutty earthiness of a blue-fleshed heritage type, the buttery sweetness of a Yukon-derived gold, the clean mildness of a classic white boiler. Cooking channels and social feeds exploded with potato-forward recipes that celebrated simplicity and nutrition at once. Smashed potatoes roasted until edges crisped and centers stayed fluffy, skin on wedges dusted with smoked paprika, chilled potato salads bound with yogurt and fresh dill instead of heavy mayonnaise. Health professionals refined their guidance further. Meta-analyses pooling data from millions of participants confirmed that when potatoes displaced ultra-processed carbohydrates in the diet, waist circumference, fasting insulin, and inflammatory markers often improved rather than worsened. The resistant starch story gained traction. Public health campaigns encouraged potato cooling as an easy hack: cook extra at dinner, refrigerate overnight, reheat gently the next day to boost gut-friendly fiber without changing the meal itself. Pediatric nutritionists highlighted the potassium and vitamin B6 content as particularly valuable for growing bodies, especially in regions where other vegetable intake remained low. School meal programs in several countries replaced some refined grain sides with roasted potato cubes or mashed preparations enriched with vegetables, seeing improvements in satiety and nutrient density without increasing cost. Yet the cautions never faded. Acrylamide levels in commercially fried products drew renewed regulatory attention. Maximum limits were set in many jurisdictions, pushing manufacturers toward lower sugar varieties, optimized blanching, and gentler par-frying temperatures. Public advisories reminded households to store potatoes in cool, dark places and to discard any with extensive sprouting or greening. Allergen labeling became routine for processed items that might contain trace potato protein. In diabetes management circles, portion education emphasized that a fist-sized boiled potato with skin, paired with lean protein and non-starchy vegetables, fit comfortably within most carbohydrate budgets, while a large order of deep-fried strips did not. Climate adaptation brought its own contradictions. While drought-tolerant varieties conserved water in dry zones, expanded irrigation in others sometimes lowered aquifers faster than rainfall could recharge them. Fertilizer runoff from high-yield fields continued to fuel algal blooms in downstream waterways when best management practices were ignored. Large-scale monoculture blocks, even of resistant cultivars, still invited pest outbreaks if natural enemies were absent. These tensions drove investment in agroecological approaches, intercropping potatoes with legumes or brassicas to confuse pests and improve soil cover, establishing hedgerows and flower strips to harbor predatory insects, reintroducing traditional knowledge from Andean communities about polyculture systems that had sustained the crop for millennia. Genetic technologies matured amid fierce debate. CRISPR-edited lines reached commercial fields in select countries. Some silenced the polyphenol oxidase gene to prevent bruising and black spot. Others knocked out susceptibility genes that late blight exploited, conferring near immunity without foreign DNA insertion. Public acceptance grew slowly as evidence accumulated that the edits produced no detectable off-target effects and that the resulting tubers matched conventional varieties in composition and safety. In regions where regulations remained restrictive, conventional marker-assisted breeding achieved similar resistance levels through natural gene stacking, proving that speed and precision did not always require molecular scissors. By the 2040s, the potato had become a flagship crop for circular bioeconomies. Processing waste peels, cull tubers, wastewater from washing lines, fed anaerobic digesters that produced biogas for on-farm energy and digestate returned as nutrient-rich fertilizer. Starch extraction plants captured side streams for bioplastics, adhesives, and textile sizing. Protein isolates from potato juice, once discarded, entered the food stream as high-quality plant-based ingredients rich in patatin. The entire value chain closed loops that once bled resources. In home gardens, the potato reclaimed pride of place. Seed-saving networks exchanged heirloom tubers via mail and community swaps, preserving genetic diversity that industrial systems sometimes narrowed. Urban rooftop plots, balcony containers, and community garden beds grew fingerlings and colored varieties in fabric pots or recycled crates, teaching city dwellers the satisfaction of digging their own dinner. Children planted eyes in egg cartons on windowsills, watched vines climb strings, and learned patience as tubers swelled underground. The sensory experience endured unchanged. Bite into a just-boiled new potato, skin still damp with steam, and the faint mineral note of soil lingers beneath the clean sweetness of fresh starch. Roast a tray of heritage reds until the skins blister and the flesh yields like warm butter, and the kitchen fills with an aroma that has comforted humans for 10,000 years. Mash a golden variety with olive oil, garlic, and rosemary, and the plate holds sunshine captured in starch form. These simple acts, peeling or not peeling, boiling or baking, seasoning lightly or saucing richly, link every eater back to the high valleys where cautious foragers first tasted the future. Through heat waves, market shocks, policy shifts, and cultural tides, the potato adapted, endured, surprised. Its genome, once sequenced and shared openly, became a library consulted by breeders on every continent. Its cultivation methods, once passed mouth to ear in mountain hamlets, now appeared in augmented reality training modules for young agronomists. Its place at the table, once questioned by fashion or fear, was reaffirmed by science, taste, and necessity. And still the tubers form in darkness, drawing sustenance from light captured months earlier by green leaves. Still the eyes wait patient for the moment they can push upward into air and begin the cycle anew. Still the plant whispers its dual message. Here is abundance beyond imagining. Here too are boundaries that must be honored. The chronicle does not close. It lengthens, season by season, bite by bite, field by field. What began beside an alpine lake continues beside every plate raised today and every plate that will be raised tomorrow, quiet, persistent, essential, alive. The chronicle does not close. It lengthens, season by season, bite by bite, field by field. What began beside an alpine lake continues beside every plate raised today and every plate that will be raised tomorrow, quiet, persistent, essential, alive. In the middle decades of the 21st century, as planetary systems strained under the weight of 10 billion souls and counting, the potato quietly asserted itself as one of the few crops capable of scaling both upward in yield and downward in resource demand without collapsing under its own contradictions. Where wheat and rice demanded predictable monsoons or heavy irrigation infrastructure, the potato asked only for a patch of earth, a handful of rain or drip lines, and 90 frost-free days. In the semi-arid Sahel, where millet stalks withered under relentless sun, new heat and drought-resilient cultivars, many carrying introgressed segments from Solanum commersone and Solanum bulbocastanum, began producing respectable harvests on fields that had previously supported little beyond subsistence sorghum. Women's cooperatives in northern Nigeria learned to intercrop these potatoes with cowpea and moringa, harvesting the tubers early while letting the legumes fix nitrogen and the trees provide light shade, creating layered production systems that tripled caloric output per hectare and buffered against total crop failure. Further south, in the frost pockets of the Lesotho highlands, farmers revived and expanded ancient terrace systems reminiscent of those first carved into Andean slopes. They planted virus-free mini-tubers supplied through national tissue culture programs, hilled the young plants with soil mixed with biochar made from local invasive brush, and mulched with maize stover to retain moisture through the dry winter. The resulting crop, small, waxy tubers with thin skins and bright yellow flesh, became both household staple and cash commodity, sold at roadside markets to miners and truck drivers who valued the potato's portability and satiety. These tubers carried slightly higher levels of zeaxanthin and lutein than conventional whites, offering modest protection against the intense ultraviolet radiation that battered eyes at altitude. Children in the villages grew up knowing the difference between a floury boil-out variety suited for thick porridge and a firm salad type that held its shape when sliced cold and dressed with wild greens and goat yogurt. Across the Indian subcontinent, the potato's footprint deepened in ways both predictable and surprising. In the Gangetic Plain, where summer heat once limited planting to the rabi season, breeders released early maturing lines that could be sown after kharif rice and harvested before the pre-monsoon heat peaked. These varieties, often carrying the Ry1 gene for resistance to potato virus Y and partial tolerance to heat-induced internal browning, allowed farmers to squeeze a third crop into the annual rotation. In Punjab and Haryana, mechanized planters placed seed pieces at exact depths while liquid fertigation delivered nitrogen and potassium in pulses timed to tuber initiation. The harvest moved directly to cold chain packhouses where tubers were washed, graded by optical sorters, and packed in ventilated mesh bags that kept respiration rates low and sprouting suppressed. Export consignments, mostly russet types prized for their high dry matter, reached Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian ports within 72 hours of lifting, arriving firm and sprout-free thanks to controlled atmosphere containers that maintained 3% oxygen and 5% carbon dioxide. In the hilly Northeast states, smallholder farmers favored colored landraces revived from gene bank collections in Shimla and Shillong. Purple-fleshed types rich in acylated anthocyanins turned mashes and curries vivid magenta, while red-skinned varieties with creamy interiors absorbed the smoky heat of but jalokia chilies without losing their distinct earthiness. Home cooks grated these potatoes raw for aloo tikki patties bound with roasted chickpea flour, or simmered chunks in mustard oil gravies thickened naturally by the potato's own starch. The crop's modest water needs made it a favorite in rain-shadow districts where tube well levels had fallen critically. Drip systems fed by rooftop rainwater harvesting tanks kept yields stable, even when canal water arrived late or not at all. In Southeast Asia, the potato carved new niches. In the Vietnamese Central Highlands, ethnic minority communities planted it alongside coffee and black pepper on sloping land, using contour hedgerows of pigeon pea to reduce erosion and fix nitrogen. The tubers matured during the cooler, dry season, providing food security when rice stocks ran low. In Indonesia's highland districts around Ding Plateau and Wonosobo, farmers grew potatoes under plastic mulch to suppress weeds and conserve soil moisture, harvesting 3 crops per year from the same plots by rotating varieties with different maturity classes. Street vendors in Bandung and Malang turned the harvest into crispy perkedel patties mixed with minced shallots and coriander, or thin sarabi pancakes incorporating mashed potato for extra tenderness. Further north in the karst landscapes of Yunnan and Guizhou, potato cultivation climbed to elevations once thought too marginal even for maize. Here, farmers selected landraces with short, compact vines that resisted lodging in strong winds and produced clusters of small, nutrient-dense tubers ideal for drying into thin chips or fermenting into sour pickles. The dried slices, rehydrated in hot broth with pickled greens and chili oil, became a staple winter dish that preserved the potato's vitamin C and potassium through months of cold storage. In these remote valleys, the crop's ability to grow on thin soils with high organic matter additions from forest leaf litter and animal manure made it a cornerstone of food sovereignty. Meanwhile, in temperate zones, the potato industry pursued ever greater efficiency. In the Pacific Northwest of North America, center pivot irrigation circles grew to a kilometer in diameter, each one planted to a single processing variety optimized for fry color, low sugars, and high specific gravity. Harvest machines with 8-row headers lifted the crop at speeds exceeding 10 kilometers per hour, their automated bin fillers transferring tubers to waiting trucks without bruising. The processing plants, steam peelers removed skins in seconds, optical graders removed defects, and high-speed cutters produced millions of uniform strips per hour. Freezers operating at -40 degrees flash froze the product in minutes, locking in texture and nutrients before bagging and palletizing for global distribution. The entire operation from field to finished fry became a symphony of sensors, algorithms, and robotics that minimized waste and maximized consistency. Yet even in these highly engineered systems, the potato retained its capacity to surprise and humble. A new strain of wart disease, long thought eradicated in North America, reappeared in isolated pockets, forcing quarantine zones and accelerated breeding for resistance. Thrips-transmitted viruses emerged in warmer growing regions, prompting the release of varieties carrying broad-spectrum resistance genes pyramided from multiple wild sources. Extreme precipitation events flooded low-lying fields, leaching nutrients and creating anaerobic conditions that favored blackleg and soft rot. In response, agronomists promoted raised bed planting, subsurface drainage tiles, and biofungicide drenches containing Trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis strains that colonized the rhizosphere and outcompeted pathogens. On the consumer front, the potato's image continued its slow rehabilitation. Nutrition influencers shared side-by-side comparisons showing that a medium-baked potato with skin delivered more potassium than a banana, more fiber than a serving of brown rice, and comparable vitamin C to an orange, all for roughly the same calories when prepared plainly. Recipe developers flooded platforms with ideas that treated the potato as a nutrient vehicle rather than a calorie bomb. Spiralized nests baked crisp and topped with poached eggs and avocado, thin sliced rounds dehydrated into chips seasoned with seaweed and nutritional yeast, mashed bowls blended with cauliflower and garlic for lower carb comfort. Plant-based chefs used potato starch and protein isolates to create creamy sauces and meat-like textures in burgers and sausages, capitalizing on patatin's excellent emulsifying and gelling properties. In schools and hospitals, the potato reappeared in redesigned menus. Steamed new potatoes tossed with olive oil, lemon zest, and fresh herbs replaced French fries in children's lunches. Pureed potato thickened soups for patients on texture-modified diets, providing calories and hydration without the heaviness of cream-based alternatives. Geriatric wards discovered that the soft, easily chewed texture of well-cooked potatoes made them ideal for older adults with dental issues, while the potassium content helped manage blood pressure in residents on restricted sodium diets. Gardeners, too, embraced the potato with renewed enthusiasm. In urban allotments and suburban backyards, people experimented with tower growing, stacking old tires or wooden frames, adding soil and seed pieces layer by layer, then harvesting by dismantling the structure from the top down. Balcony growers used fabric pots or recycled buckets, choosing compact determinate varieties that produced heavy yields in small volumes. Seed libraries circulated certified disease-free tubers of rare heritage types, pink fir apple with its knobby shape and nutty flavor, salad blue with deep violet flesh, Mayan gold with buttery richness, keeping genetic diversity alive outside institutional collections. Through all these threads, industrial scale, smallholder resilience, urban revival, scientific frontier, the potato's core qualities remained constant. A freshly lifted tuber still felt cool and heavy in the hand, its skin carrying the faint scent of damp earth. When cut, the flesh revealed concentric rings of starch storage, pale and dense. When cooked, the granules swelled, the cell walls softened, and the familiar transformation occurred, from firm and waxy to fluffy and mealy, or from crisp to creamy, depending on variety and method. The nutrients stayed stubbornly present, potassium in quantities that supported nerve impulses and muscle contractions, vitamin C that survived gentle steaming, resistant starch that fed gut microbes when the potato was cooled after cooking. The drawbacks, too, stayed close. Light still triggered greening and solanine synthesis, improper storage still invited sprouting and rot, high heat frying still risked acrylamide formation, over-reliance in monoculture still courted disaster. Yet each generation learned the same lessons anew. Store in darkness, cook thoroughly, vary preparations, rotate fields, diversify varieties, balance the plate. The potato never demanded blind trust, it rewarded attention. And so the plant continued its patient dialogue with humanity, offering calories when hunger pressed, comfort when cold descended, nutrition when diets faltered, and lessons when arrogance grew. Its tubers, formed in quiet darkness from sunlight captured by green leaves, remained a living archive of 10,000 years of coevolution, a record written in starch, skin, and eye, in flavor, texture, and resilience, in abundance earned through care and vulnerability contained by wisdom. The story stretches still. Tomorrow's breeders will cross genes yet undiscovered. Tomorrow's farmers will plant in climates yet unseen. Tomorrow's cooks will invent dishes yet untasted. And tomorrow's eaters will bite into a potato, perhaps boiled simply, perhaps roasted crisp, perhaps mashed with memory, and taste once more the same ancient promise that first drew cautious fingers to the soil beside Lake Titicaca. Quiet, persistent, essential, alive, the story stretches still. Tomorrow's breeders will cross genes yet undiscovered. Tomorrow's farmers will plant in climates yet unseen. Tomorrow's cooks will invent dishes yet untasted. And tomorrow's eaters will bite into a potato, perhaps boiled simply, perhaps roasted crisp, perhaps mashed with memory, and taste once more the same ancient promise that first drew cautious fingers to the soil beside Lake Titicaca. Quiet, persistent, essential, alive. By the closing years of the 21st century, the potato had become something more than crop or staple. It had evolved into a planetary sentinel, a living gauge of humanity's capacity to adapt without breaking the systems that sustained it. In the vast irrigated basins of Central Asia, where the Aral Sea's ghost still haunted shrinking shorelines, potato fields now stretched under solar-powered pivot arms that drew water from deep aquifers recharged partly by managed aquifer storage projects. The varieties grown here carried stacked genes for salinity tolerance borrowed from coastal wild relatives, allowing roots to push through soils that registered electrical conductivity readings once considered lethal. Tubers emerged slightly smaller but denser, their flesh carrying a faint briny sweetness that local cooks balanced with fresh coriander and yogurt in dishes that echoed the fermented takash of distant ancestors. These potatoes fed not only families, but also the workers rebuilding degraded wetlands, their high potassium content helping offset the sodium load from desalinated drinking water piped in long-distance aqueducts. In the thawing permafrost zones of Siberia and northern Canada, potato cultivation pushed poleward faster than almost any other food crop. Short-season cultivars, some maturing in 65 days, were planted as soon as snowmelt allowed, their stolons forming tubers during the frantic burst of 24-hour daylight. Farmers experimented with floating row covers and low tunnels to extend the frost-free window by critical weeks, harvesting small, waxy potatoes whose skins glowed pale gold under the low-angle sun. These northern tubers developed unusually high levels of certain flavonoids as a response to intense ultraviolet exposure, giving them antioxidant profiles that researchers began studying for potential benefits in populations facing long dark winters and limited fresh produce. In community freezers, the potatoes were blanched and packed alongside wild blueberries and cloudberries, creating mixed rations that sustained remote settlements through months when supply planes could not land. Down in the lowlands of Bangladesh and the Mekong Delta, where sea level rise pushed saltwater farther inland each decade, the potato found unlikely allies in floating agriculture. On mats of water, hyacinth and rice straw anchored in shallow floodplains, farmers layered soil and compost, planting virus-indexed seed pieces that sent roots down into the nutrient-rich water below. The plants grew compact and low, their leaves catching breezes off the water to stay cool during humid afternoons. Harvested tubers, often no larger than golf balls, were boiled whole and eaten with fermented fish paste or chili paste, their mild starch balancing the intense salinity of preserved proteins. These floating plots produced food even when monsoon floods submerged conventional fields, offering a buffer against the annual cycle of inundation that had once left millions hungry. In the megacities Dhaka, Lagos, Sao Paulo, Jakarta, vertical farms and rooftop greenhouses turned potatoes into an ultra-local crop. In climate-controlled towers, lead-lit shelves supported aeroponic systems where nutrient mist bathed dangling roots 24 hours a day. Plants were pruned to stay short, encouraged to tuberize early through manipulated photoperiods mimicking Andean short days. The resulting mini tubers, harvested every 6 to 8 weeks, went straight to nearby restaurants and school kitchens, arriving within hours of lifting. Chefs prized their consistent size and pristine appearance, slicing them paper-thin for Carpaccio-style salads or pressing them into delicate galettes layered with microgreens. The energy math was tight. Solar plus grid storage covered daytime lighting, waste heat from adjacent data centers warmed the grow rooms, but the carbon footprint per kilogram stayed lower than long-haul imports and the freshness was unmatched. Meanwhile, in the research greenhouses of gene banks and university labs, the potato's genome was being rewritten in finer and finer strokes. Base editors and prime editors allowed single nucleotide changes without double-strand breaks, tweaking traits with surgical accuracy. Silencing a promoter to reduce cold sweetening sugars in storage varieties, upregulating a transporter to increase iron accumulation in the flesh, inserting synthetic promoters that drove tuber-specific expression of drought response genes. Some lines were designed to produce their own biopesticides, small proteins toxic only to Colorado potato beetle larvae, eliminating the need for foliar sprays in organic systems. Others accumulated higher levels of provitamin carotenoids, turning the interior a deep orange and addressing micronutrient deficiencies in regions where the potato had become the dominant vegetable. Public perception shifted gradually but decisively. Long-running dietary studies, now spanning 3 generations, showed that populations with consistent moderate potato intake, especially skin on preparations, had lower rates of hypertension and better gut microbiome diversity than those relying heavily on refined grains or ultra-processed starches. The resistant starch narrative entered mainstream health media. Phrases like retrograded potato appeared in wellness articles alongside kombucha and kimchi. Cooking schools taught techniques to maximize it: boil or steam, cool completely in the refrigerator for at least 12 hours, then reheat gently to preserve the structural changes in the starch granules. Dietitians created meal templates that positioned the potato as a smart carb: half a plate of roasted wedges with skin, a quarter plate of grilled fish or lentils, a quarter plate of leafy greens, delivering balanced macros without the blood sugar spikes once feared. The culinary renaissance deepened. Molecular gastronomists used potato starch gels to create spheres that burst with flavored broths when bitten. Bakers perfected gluten-free loaves where mashed potato replaced part of the flour, yielding moist crumb and extended shelf life thanks to the natural humectants. Fermentation artists pushed boundaries. potato kvass flavored with spruce tips, potato miso inoculated with koji spores, potato sourdough starters that developed complex lactic and acidic notes over weeks. Street food innovators in Manila deep-fried thin potato ribbons into nests cradling adobo-style eggs, while in Cape Town vendors grilled whole potatoes over open coals until the skins charred, then split them open and filled the fluffy interiors with chakalaka and sour cream. Yet every advance carried its shadow. New pathogen pressures emerged, strains of Alternaria that thrived in warmer nights, nematode populations adapting to resistant rootstocks, viral complexes vectored by aphids that had expanded their range with milder winters. Breeders raced to pyramid more resistance genes, but the pathogen evolution reminded everyone that nature never stopped editing its own code. Water politics grew tense in over-allocated basins. Potato fields, even efficient ones, sometimes became scapegoats in disputes over river rights. Energy costs for controlled environment agriculture fluctuated with grid reliability, forcing operators to install hybrid solar-wind battery systems or face unprofitable seasons. In response, decentralized models proliferated. Farmer cooperatives invested in shared tissue culture labs, producing clean starters for hundreds of members. Digital platforms matched seed savers with growers seeking rare landraces, preserving alleles that industrial pipelines sometimes discarded. Community solar-powered cold stores appeared in rural districts, allowing smallholders to hold crops until prices improved instead of selling at harvest glut. These grassroots innovations kept the potato accessible even as global supply chains occasionally stuttered under geopolitical tension or extreme weather. By century's end, the potato stood as one of the great survivors of the Anthropocene, a plant that had walked with humans through ice ages, empire collapses, industrial revolutions, digital transformations, and climate upheaval. Its tubers still formed in the dark from sunlight captured by leaves, its eyes still waited patiently for the right conditions to sprout, its flesh still yielded the same comforting starch when heated. The nutrients remained stubbornly generous: potassium to balance electrolytes, vitamin C to support collagen, fiber and resistant starch to feed the microbiome, modest but complete protein to round out plant-based meals. The cautions endured as faithfully: store away from light, cook to break down anti-nutrients, moderate high heat preparations, diversify rotations, balance the diet. In quiet moments, perhaps a grandmother peeling new potatoes by a window in a flooded Delta house, perhaps a scientist staring at a CRISPR-edited seedling under grow lights, perhaps a child digging in a school garden bed, the potato still whispered its oldest lesson: abundance is possible, vulnerability is inevitable. Attention is required, respect is rewarded, and so it continues. Through whatever centuries follow, in whatever forms humanity takes, the potato will almost certainly still be there, quietly swelling underground, patiently waiting to be lifted, cooked, shared, tasted, a small miracle of starch and soil, a companion older than most civilizations. A reminder that some partnerships, once begun beside an ancient lake under thin mountain air, proved too useful, too resilient, too intertwined with human need ever to be set aside. The chronicle lengthens, season by season, bite by bite, field by field, forever unfinished, forever alive. The chronicle lengthens, season by season, bite by bite, field by field, forever unfinished, forever alive. In laboratories orbiting high above the planet and in soil beds engineered for the red dust of Mars, the potato's ancient partnership with humanity entered its most audacious chapter yet. NASA and partner agencies selected specific cultivars for their compact growth habit, high nutritional density, and tolerance to the controlled environments of spacecraft and planetary habitats. The plants were grown in hydroponic or aeroponic modules under LED spectra tuned to the exact wavelengths that triggered tuber initiation, using recycled water and nutrients derived from crew waste. Tubers formed reliably within 90 days, delivering calories, potassium, vitamin C, and resistant starch that helped maintain astronaut bone density and gut health during long-duration missions. The same qualities that once sustained Andean herders at 12,000 feet now kept explorers alive in zero gravity and on extraterrestrial surfaces, where every gram of food had to justify its launch weight. Scientists monitored glycocalid levels meticulously to ensure no green tubers developed under artificial lighting, while the starch content was measured for its ability to provide steady energy without spiking blood glucose in the stress of space travel. Back on Earth, the same genetic lines that thrived in orbit were adapted for extreme terrestrial conditions. In the high deserts of the Atacama, where rainfall averages less than 1 millimeter per year, farmers used subsurface drip irrigation fed by fog nets to grow salt-tolerant varieties whose roots excluded sodium while pulling potassium deep from the soil profile. The resulting tubers, small and intensely flavored, were dried into thin flakes that rehydrated into nutrient-rich stews, echoing the chuño technique refined 10,000 years earlier. In the flooded paddies of the Ganges Delta during monsoon seasons, floating rafts supported potato vines whose stolons dangled into nutrient films, producing clusters of waxy tubers that resisted waterlogging and provided emergency calories when rice crops submerged. These adaptations were not miracles, but the logical extension of the plant's original resilience, its ability to store energy underground, to sprout from eyes under adverse conditions, and to convert minimal resources into maximum sustenance. The qualities that define the potato are as varied as the 10,000 years of human selection that shaped them. The plant itself is a herbaceous perennial with branch stems up to 1 meter tall, compound leaves with 5 to 9 leaflets, and flowers whose color ranges from pure white through lavender to deep purple depending on the cultivar. Each flower contains 5 petals and produces small green berries filled with hundreds of seeds, though most commercial production relies on vegetative propagation through tubers. The tubers themselves vary enormously. Some are round and smooth like the classic russet Burbank, ideal for baking because their high starch content expands dramatically when heated. Others are elongated fingerlings whose waxy texture holds shape in salads. Still others are knobby heirlooms whose irregular shapes hide pockets of intense flavor. Skin colors span snow white, rose pink, deep red, blue black, and even striped patterns, while flesh can be ivory, yellow, pink, or vivid purple thanks to anthocyanins and carotenoids. Starch composition differs too. High amylose types create fluffy, mealy textures when boiled, while high amylopectin types remain firm and creamy. Dry matter content ranges from 15 to 25%, directly influencing cooking behavior and nutritional density. These physical traits translate into an extraordinary nutritional profile that has supported civilizations for millennia. A single medium potato with skin intact supplies approximately 110 calories, almost all from complex carbohydrates that release energy gradually. The fiber content, concentrated in the skin, reaches 4 grams per serving, promoting satiety and regular digestion. Potassium levels average 620 milligrams, more than a banana, helping regulate blood pressure, fluid balance, and muscle function. Vitamin C content, though reduced by cooking, still provides up to 25% of daily needs in a fresh tuber, supporting immune response and collagen synthesis. Vitamin B6 contributes 25% of daily requirements, aiding neurotransmitter production and hemoglobin formation. Folate, magnesium, phosphorus, and manganese appear in meaningful amounts, while the protein fraction, patatin and other protease inhibitors, offers a complete amino acid profile unusual for root crop. Colored varieties add powerful antioxidants, chlorogenic acid in white flesh types, lutein and zeaxanthin in yellows, and acylated anthocyanins in reds and purples that demonstrate anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties in laboratory studies. When potatoes are boiled and cooled, up to 10% of the starch retrogrades into resistant starch, acting as a prebiotic that ferments in the colon to produce butyrate, which nourishes colonocytes and reduces inflammation. The benefits extend far beyond basic nutrition. In regions with limited access to animal protein, potatoes provide high-quality plant protein that complements legumes. Their low-fat content and natural absence of cholesterol make them heart-healthy when prepared without added oils. The high water content, nearly 80%, helps with hydration in hot climates. For athletes, the complex carbohydrates replenish glycogen stores efficiently after exercise. For diabetics following careful meal planning, a modest serving paired with fiber and protein produces a moderate glycemic response far gentler than refined grains. In public health programs, potato-based meals have been shown to improve micronutrient status in children, reduce stunting, and support cognitive development through consistent B vitamin supply. Even in veterinary medicine, potato-derived starches serve as binders in animal feeds, while the pulp from processing plants becomes high-fiber cattle feed that improves rumen health. Yet the potato's disadvantages are equally real and demand constant vigilance. The nightshade family chemistry that protects the plant from insects also produces glycoalkaloids, primarily solanine and chaconine, concentrated in green skin, sprouts, and bitter flesh. Levels above 20 milligrams per 100 grams can cause gastrointestinal distress, headaches, and in extreme cases neurological symptoms, hence the strict rule to discard any green or sprouted tubers and never eat them raw. Storage in light triggers rapid solanine synthesis, teaching every grower and cook the absolute necessity of cool, dark conditions. Raw potatoes contain protease inhibitors and lectins that interfere with digestion, rendering them indigestible until thoroughly cooked. High-temperature cooking methods introduce another risk. The Maillard reaction between reducing sugars and asparagine creates acrylamide, a potential carcinogen whose levels rise dramatically in French fries, chips, and roasted preparations. Regulatory bodies therefore set maximum limits and encourage lower sugar varieties, blanching, and gentler cooking temperatures. The high glycemic index of hot mashed or fried potatoes can cause rapid blood sugar spikes when eaten alone, necessitating pairing with fats, proteins, and acidic foods to blunt the response. Over-reliance on potatoes as a monoculture has repeatedly led to famine, as the 1845 blight demonstrated, because the crop's vegetative propagation spreads viruses and fungi quickly. Soil-borne pests, wireworms, nematodes, Colorado potato beetles, can devastate fields if rotation is ignored. In some soils, repeated cropping depletes micronutrients and increases heavy metal uptake, requiring careful soil management. These drawbacks have never overshadowed the benefits when knowledge guides use. Ancient Andean farmers learned to freeze dry into chuño and select low-toxin lines. Modern processors test every batch for glycoalkaloids and acrylamide precursors. Home-cooked store tubers in paper bags, trim sprouts, and vary preparations, boiling, steaming, cooling for resistant starch, roasting at moderate temperatures. The plant itself teaches balance. Its flowers attract pollinators, its residues enrich compost, its diversity allows adaptation. Over 5,000 native cultivars still exist in the Andes, each with unique combinations of yield, flavor, disease resistance, and nutrient density. The International Potato Center in Peru maintains the world's largest collection, distributing germplasm that has saved crops on every continent. Cultural symbolism surrounding the potato is equally rich. In the Andes, it remains sacred, offered to Pachamama in planting rituals, its shape inspiring pottery and textiles. In Europe, it symbolized resilience after the Irish famine, becoming a motif in literature and folk songs. In Asia, it represents prosperity in harvest festivals. In modern popular culture, it appears in everything from children's books to space mission logos, a humble tuber that has traveled from mountain lake to lunar outpost. Traditional preparations span the globe: Peruvian causa layered with avocado and tuna, Irish kilcannon whipped with kale and scallions, German Kartoffelsalat dressed with vinegar and bacon, Indian aloo gobi spiced with turmeric and cumin, Ethiopian potatoes stewed with berber and lentils, Japanese potato korok breaded and fried. Each recipe highlights a different quality: floury types for mashing, waxy for slicing, colored for visual drama. The potato's journey has never been linear. It survived conquest, famine, war, climate shifts, and technological leaps. It fed empires and refugees alike. It powered industrial revolutions and space exploration. Its 500 distinct qualities, chemical, nutritional, agronomic, culinary, cultural, interweave into a single living story that continues to unfold. Every tuber dug from the earth carries 10 millennia of human ingenuity and nature's generosity. Every meal prepared from it carries the potential for nourishment or imbalance depending on the care taken. The plant asks only for respect: plant diversely, store wisely, cook thoughtfully, eat moderately, and it will keep giving. And still the chronicle lengthens. The same eyes that first opened beside Lake Titicaca now open in Martian regolith simulant. The same starch that once fueled mountain hunters now powers astronauts. The same lessons, abundance earned through attention, vulnerability managed through wisdom, echo in every garden, every laboratory, every kitchen. The potato remains what it has always been: quiet partner, generous teacher, living archive of human possibility. Its story does not end. It simply waits for the next season, the next bite, the next field, forever unfinished, forever alive. Its story does not end. It simply waits for the next season, the next bite, the next field, forever unfinished, forever alive. The qualities that make the potato such an enduring companion are woven into every layer of its being, from the microscopic starch granules packed inside its cells to the macroscopic shapes and colors that have delighted farmers and cooks for millennia. At its core, the tuber is a modified stem, swollen with energy reserves that consist primarily of amylose and amylopectin in varying ratios. High amylose varieties produce the light, fluffy texture beloved in baked potatoes because the linear starch molecules expand dramatically when heated and then set into a tender structure upon cooling, while amylopectin-dominant types remain firm and waxy, perfect for boiling or slicing without disintegrating. The skin, thin yet protective, is lined with lenticels that allow the living tuber to breathe even after harvest, and beneath it lies a cortex rich in polyphenols that act as natural antioxidants, shielding the flesh from oxidation and giving colored varieties their vivid hues. Purple potatoes owe their deep tones to acylated anthocyanins that remain stable through cooking, while yellow-fleshed types derive their golden glow from lutein and zeaxanthin, carotenoids that concentrate in the tuber as the plant converts sunlight into storage compounds. The eyes, those small indentations scattered across the surface, are actually dormant buds protected by a tiny scale leaf. Each one contains meristematic tissue capable of generating an entire new plant when conditions allow, a quality that made vegetative propagation so reliable for early cultivators who simply cut tubers into pieces and planted the sections containing at least one eye. These physical attributes translate directly into the potato's remarkable versatility in the kitchen and the body. When heat is applied, the starch granules absorb water, swell, and burst in a process called gelatinization, turning the hard, dense tuber into something soft, digestible, and satisfying. Boiling or steaming preserves the maximum vitamin content because water-soluble nutrients like vitamin C and B6 leach less when the skin remains intact. Steaming new potatoes harvested early in the season yields a creamy interior with a subtle sweetness from natural sugars that have not yet converted fully to starch. Roasting at moderate temperatures caramelizes the natural sugars on the surface while the interior steams in its own moisture, creating the irresistible contrast of crisp skin and fluffy center. Frying, whether shallow or deep, exploits the high dry matter content of certain varieties to produce a golden crust through rapid dehydration and Maillard browning, yet the careful cook knows to choose low sugar tubers to minimize unwanted compounds. Mashed potatoes become silky when riced rather than whipped, avoiding the release of excess starch that would otherwise turn the dish gluey. The cooled potato, as generations of Andean women discovered when preparing tacash, undergoes retrogradation, where starch molecules realign into crystalline structures that resist rapid digestion, delivering a slow-release energy source that supports stable blood sugar and feeds beneficial gut bacteria over many hours. The benefits of the potato extend into every system of the human body when it is enjoyed as part of a thoughtful diet. The potassium load, delivered in a naturally low-sodium package, helps counteract the effects of modern processed foods by relaxing blood vessel walls, lowering blood pressure, and easing the workload on the heart. Populations with high potato intake but minimal added salt consistently show better cardiovascular markers. Vitamin C, preserved best in freshly harvested or gently cooked tubers, bolsters immune cell function and enhances iron absorption from plant sources, a critical advantage in diets where meat is scarce. Vitamin B6 supports the synthesis of serotonin and dopamine, contributing to mood stability and cognitive clarity, while folate in the skin aids DNA repair and fetal development. The fiber matrix, both soluble and insoluble, slows gastric emptying, promotes regular bowel movements, and creates a sense of fullness that can assist with weight management when portions are respected. Resistant starch formed by cooling acts as a prebiotic, increasing populations of bifidobacteria and lactobacillus that produce short-chain fatty acids, strengthening the intestinal barrier and modulating inflammation throughout the body. Antioxidants in colored varieties neutralize free radicals generated by exercise, pollution, or normal metabolism, potentially reducing oxidative stress linked to chronic conditions. For athletes, the potato's carbohydrate profile replenishes muscle glycogen more efficiently than many other starches, and its electrolyte balance helps prevent cramps during prolonged activity. In regions combating hidden hunger, biofortified potatoes enriched through conventional breeding or precise genetic methods have raised iron and zinc levels in vulnerable populations, improving energy, immunity, and growth rates in children without requiring dietary change beyond what people already enjoy. Even the protein fraction, modest at 2 to 3 grams per medium tuber, punches above its weight because patatin, the dominant storage protein, contains a balanced profile of essential amino acids and demonstrates anti-inflammatory properties in laboratory models. When combined with legumes or dairy, the potato completes a full amino acid spectrum that rivals many animal sources. The low glycemic load of cooled or skin-on preparations makes it compatible with metabolic health plans, while its natural gluten-free status opens doors for those with celiac disease or wheat sensitivities. In traditional medicine systems, the potato has been used for centuries as a soothing poultice for burns, wounds, and joint pain, its starch forming a protective barrier and its anti-inflammatory compounds easing discomfort. Modern research confirms that potato-derived extracts can inhibit certain enzymes linked to hypertension and diabetes, suggesting the plant still holds undiscovered therapeutic potential. Yet the potato is never without its shadow side, and understanding the disadvantages is essential to safe enjoyment. Glycoalkaloids serve as the plant's chemical defense, deterring insects and fungi, but they accumulate rapidly in any part exposed to light or mechanical damage. A green-tinged potato can contain levels high enough to cause nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and in severe cases neurological effects such as dizziness or hallucinations. The compounds are heat-stable, surviving ordinary cooking, which is why visual inspection and proper dark storage are non-negotiable. Sprouts concentrate toxins even more, requiring complete removal of both sprout and the flesh beneath. Raw consumption is inadvisable because protease inhibitors block digestive enzymes and lectins can irritate the gut lining, though thorough cooking neutralizes most of these. Acrylamide formation during high heat processing remains a concern. The reaction between free asparagine and reducing sugars at temperatures above 120 degrees Celsius produces a compound classified as a probable carcinogen, with the highest levels appearing in thin-cut fries and chips. Processors mitigate this by selecting low-sugar varieties, blanching to leach sugars, and optimizing fry times and temperatures, while home cooks can reduce risk by soaking cut pieces in water, parboiling before roasting, or simply choosing gentler methods more often. Environmental and agronomic drawbacks are equally important to acknowledge. The potato's shallow root system makes it vulnerable to drought, requiring consistent moisture that can strain water resources in arid regions unless efficient irrigation is used. Heavy reliance on nitrogen fertilizers to achieve maximum yields can lead to nitrate leaching into groundwater, contributing to eutrophication in rivers and lakes. Monoculture fields invite rapid buildup of soil-borne pathogens and pests. The Colorado potato beetle has developed resistance to multiple insecticide classes, while cyst nematodes can persist in soil for decades, forcing longer rotations or soil fumigation that carries its own ecological cost. In storage, improper ventilation invites soft rot bacteria and fungi that can destroy entire harvests within days, releasing foul odors and rendering tubers unusable. Economically, the crop's perishability and bulk make it expensive to transport long distances without refrigeration, leading to price volatility and food waste when gluts occur. Overdependence in certain regions has historically amplified famine risks when disease strikes, reminding us that diversity in both varieties and cropping systems is the best insurance. Despite these challenges, the potato's global significance continues to grow because its benefits, when managed wisely, far outweigh the manageable risks. It feeds more people per hectare than most staples in marginal lands, its short cycle allows multiple harvests in favorable climates, and its storability provides a buffer against seasonal shortages. Cultural traditions around the world have adapted the tuber to local tastes and needs, turning potential drawbacks into strengths. Fermentation in the Andes reduces bitterness and creates probiotic foods. Peeling and leaching in some Asian preparations minimizes glycalkaloids. Pairing with spices and fats in curries blunts glycemic impact while enhancing absorption of fat-soluble nutrients. The plant's genetic diversity, still centered in its Andean birthplace but now spread worldwide, offers breeders an almost infinite palette for developing varieties suited to changing climates, pest pressures, and nutritional goals. Every fact about the potato, from the ancient freeze-drying techniques that preserved it for years to the modern CRISPR edits that enhance its resilience, underscores the same truth. This is a food that rewards knowledge and punishes carelessness. Its discovery by highland foragers opened a path to abundance that civilizations have followed ever since. Its qualities of versatility, nutrition, and adaptability have sustained explorers, emperors, and everyday families alike. Its benefits nourish bodies and communities when preparation respects its nature. Its disadvantages teach humility and vigilance, reminding us that no gift of the earth is without conditions. The potato has traveled from misty Andean slopes to orbital greenhouses, from subsistence plots to industrial processing lines, and in every journey it has carried the same quiet power. And so the chronicle continues, season by season, bite by bite, field by field, as new generations discover old truths and old truths find new expressions. The potato waits, patient and generous, for those who will plant, harvest, cook, and savor it with the respect it has always deserved, ensuring that its story remains forever unfinished, forever alive. The chronicle continues, season by season, bite by bite, field by field, as new generations discover old truths and old truths find new expressions. The potato waits, patient and generous, for those who will plant, harvest, cook, and savor it with the respect it has always deserved, ensuring that its story remains forever unfinished, forever alive. Across every corner of the world today, the potato stands as the ultimate bridge between ancient wisdom and future possibility, its 500 distinct qualities forming a living tapestry that has sustained humanity through every trial and triumph imaginable. From the moment those first cautious foragers in the high Andes lifted the small bitter tubers from the volcanic soil beside Lake Titicaca more than 10,000 years ago, the plant revealed its fundamental nature as a survivor, a storehouse of energy, and a teacher of balance. Those early people quickly learned that the wild tubers, though laced with protective glycoalkaloids that could cause discomfort if eaten raw or green, became safe and nourishing once boiled or steamed, releasing complex starches that provided steady warmth through the thin mountain air where other crops refused to grow. They discovered the miracle of chuño by spreading the harvest on the freezing ground at night, allowing the morning sun to thaw and dry the pieces over repeated cycles until the tubers shrank into lightweight, long-lasting nuggets that could be stored for years without spoiling, carrying families through the harshest winters and long journeys across the Cordillera. This ancient technique concentrated the potato's natural vitamins and minerals, turning a simple root into a superfood perfectly matched to high-altitude life, where oxygen was scarce and every calorie counted. As selective breeding transformed the wild plants into thousands of distinct landraces, each with its own shape, color, flavor, and resilience, the potato's qualities multiplied in astonishing ways. Some varieties developed thick skins that resisted frost and insects. Others produced elongated fingerlings ideal for boiling whole, while still others formed round, floury tubers that mashed into creamy porridges, absorbing the flavors of herbs and broths with effortless grace. The flowers, delicate white or lavender clusters atop hairy stems, signaled the underground work of stolen swelling, where energy captured by pinnate leaves was converted into starch granules that could reach 22% of the tuber's weight, providing more calories per acre than almost any other staple in poor soils. The eyes, those tiny protective buds, allowed even a single damaged tuber to regenerate an entire plant, making propagation simple and reliable for farmers who cut seed pieces with at least one eye and planted them in hilled rows to shield the developing crop from light and cold. Colored flesh emerged through natural mutations and careful selection, reds rich in anthocyanins that acted as powerful antioxidants, yellows loaded with lutein for eye health, purples packed with chlorogenic acid that fought inflammation, each hue adding layers of nutritional depth that modern science has only begun to quantify. The benefits that flowed from these qualities have shaped human health and society in ways that touch every system of the body and every level of civilization. A single medium potato with skin intact delivers a complete package of sustained energy from complex carbohydrates that break down slowly, preventing the crashes associated with refined sugars while supplying nearly 4 grams of fiber to support steady digestion and blood sugar regulation. Potassium levels exceed 600 milligrams, more than many fruits, helping maintain fluid balance, relax blood vessels, and support heart rhythm during physical labor or stress. Vitamin C, preserved best when the skin stays on during gentle cooking, boosts immunity and collagen production, while vitamin B6 aids brain chemistry and red blood cell formation at levels that can reach 25% of daily needs. The modest protein content built around papatin offers a balanced amino acid profile that complements legumes and grains, making complete meals possible even in plant-heavy diets. When cooked and cooled, up to 10% of the starch retrogrades into resistant starch, feeding beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, strengthening the intestinal lining, reducing inflammation, and promoting long-term metabolic health. Antioxidants in colored varieties neutralize free radicals, potentially lowering risks associated with oxidative stress, while the low-fat and cholesterol-free nature makes the potato a heart-friendly choice when prepared thoughtfully. In regions facing micronutrient deficiencies, biofortified lines have raised iron and zinc uptake, improving energy levels, immune function, and child growth without requiring changes in eating habits. For athletes, the tuber replenishes glycogen stores efficiently after exercise, its natural electrolytes helping prevent cramps and fatigue. In traditional healing, the mashed tuber has soothed burns and joints for centuries, its starch forming a protective barrier and its compounds easing discomfort, qualities now confirmed by laboratory studies showing enzyme inhibition linked to blood pressure and diabetes management. Throughout history, these benefits have powered empires and ordinary lives alike. The Inca stored vast quantities of chuño in mountain granaries to feed armies and cities during sieges or droughts, while European peasants after the 16th century discovered that a single acre could feed a family of 6 where grain fields failed, allowing populations to grow and cities to rise. In the 20th century, the potato sustained soldiers and civilians through wars and reconstruction, its storability and high yield turning marginal lands into productive fields. Today, in space programs and extreme environments, the same qualities that once sustained Andean herders now keep explorers alive. The tubers grown in controlled modules delivering reliable calories, vitamins, and fiber under artificial light and recycled water. The plant's short growing cycle of 60 to 120 days allows multiple harvests in favorable climates, its ability to thrive in poor soils with minimal inputs making it a cornerstone of food security in changing climates, and its storability in cool, dark conditions providing a buffer against seasonal shortages that no other staple matches so reliably. Yet the potato has always carried clear disadvantages that demand respect and knowledge, for its very strengths contain the seeds of risk when ignored. The glycoalkaloids that protect the plant from pests accumulate in any green or sprouted part, reaching levels that can cause nausea, headaches, and in extreme cases neurological effects. Therefore, every cook and grower learns to store tubers in complete darkness, trim sprouts completely, and discard any discolored flesh. Raw potatoes remain indigestible because their starch resists human enzymes and their natural inhibitors block digestion, requiring thorough cooking to unlock nutrition and safety. High-heat methods like deep frying or prolonged roasting trigger acrylamide formation through the reaction of asparagine and reducing sugars, a compound linked to long-term health concerns that processors mitigate by selecting special low-sugar varieties and optimizing temperatures, while home cooks reduce risk through soaking, parboiling, and moderate roasting. The high glycemic impact of hot mashed or fried potatoes can spike blood sugar when eaten alone, teaching the importance of pairing with proteins, fats, and vegetables to slow absorption. Monoculture dependence has led to devastating famines, as the Irish blight of 1845 proved when a single pathogen destroyed fields of genetically uniform plants, wiping out a staple that had fed millions and forcing lessons in diversity, rotation, and resistant breeding that still guide agriculture today. Soil pests such as wireworms and nematodes tunnel through tubers in repeated plantings, while heavy fertilizer use can leach nitrates into waterways, creating ecological imbalances that require cover crops, integrated pest management, and careful soil stewardship. Storage rot spreads rapidly in poor ventilation, turning entire harvests to slime and teaching the necessity of cool, airy conditions and regular inspection. These disadvantages have never diminished the potato's gifts, they have only sharpened the wisdom required to enjoy them safely. Ancient farmers rotated fields with nitrogen-fixing crops, selected low-toxin lines, and perfected freeze-drying to neutralize bitterness. Modern breeders stack resistance genes from wild relatives, processors test every batch for safety, and home cooks vary methods, boiling, steaming, cooling for resistant starch, roasting gently to maximize benefits while minimizing risks. The plant itself models balance, its flowers supporting pollinators, its residues enriching compost, its genetic diversity offering solutions for every challenge. Over 5,000 native cultivars still grow in the Andes, each one a living library of flavor, resilience, and nutrition that breeders draw upon to meet new climates and needs. The International Potato Center safeguards this heritage, distributing germplasm that has rescued crops worldwide and will continue to do so as temperatures rise and pests evolve. In every culture, the potato has inspired traditions that celebrate its dual nature of abundance and caution. Peruvian cooks layer yellow potatoes with avocado and tuna in causa, the waxy texture holding shape while absorbing bright flavors. Irish families whip colcannon with kale and scallions, the floury flesh absorbing cream and butter into comforting clouds. German salads dress cold slices in vinegar and herbs, the firm waxy types keeping their bite. Indian aloo gobi simmers chunks with spices until the starch thickens the gravy naturally. Ethiopian stews blend potatoes with Berber and lentils, the mild flavor balancing heat and providing substance. Japanese korok bread and fry mashed potato into golden croquettes, the crisp exterior contrasting creamy interiors. Each dish highlights a different quality while respecting the plant's limits through proper cooking and balanced plates. Today the potato continues its quiet revolution in laboratories and fields alike. CRISPR-edited lines resist blight without sprays, vertical farms produce clean mini tubers in cities, regenerative farmers build soil health through cover crops and minimal tillage, and home gardeners save heirloom eyes in egg cartons to teach children the cycle of growth. The same eyes that first opened beside an ancient lake now open in Martian soil simulant and orbital greenhouses, carrying the same promise of nourishment across impossible distances. The same starch that once warmed mountain hunters now powers astronauts and school lunches, its nutrients supporting bodies and minds through every stage of life. Every one of the 500 facts woven through this history points to the same enduring truth. The potato is a generous companion that asks only for attention. Plant it diversely, hill the rows to protect young tubers, store in darkness, cook thoroughly, cool when possible for resistant starch, pair thoughtfully on the plate, rotate fields, and it will reward you with abundance beyond measure. Ignore its lessons, plant only one variety, store in light, fry excessively, rely on it alone, and it will remind you of nature's balance with swift clarity. From the first cautious bite 10,000 years ago to the last harvest of tomorrow, the potato has walked beside humanity as teacher, sustainer, and mirror, reflecting both our ingenuity and our need for humility. Its journey from misty Andean peaks to every table on earth is the story of cooperation between people and plant, of trial and triumph, of qualities that nourish and cautions that protect. It has fed empires and refugees, powered revolutions and space missions, comforted the sick and celebrated the harvest. Its benefits have built strong bodies and stable societies. Its disadvantages have taught wisdom that endures. The potato waits now in the soil of the future, ready for the next hands that will lift it, the next fires that will cook it, the next mouths that will taste its ancient promise renewed in every season. And so we come to the end of this journey through the history and qualities of the potato, its benefits and drawbacks laid bare so that we may enjoy it comfortably and according to the rules. Please let us know in the comments where you are watching this history video and what time you are watching it, and tell me about the theme you are watching from. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more history videos in the future.